Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel and welcome to my Omnibus series. I've got so many of these omnibuses that are going to come out so that you'll be able to listen to an hour's worth of stories, which I know you're going to love. You know, the thing is that telling stories is such a fine art, and it's something that was practiced hundreds of years ago when people didn't have the technology that we have today. And everyone would gather around the fire and listen to a wonderful story. And also, what is so wonderful about a story is that personally, I think it is the best way to go to sleep. Every night when I go to bed, I always listen to stories. And that's something that parents used to do with their children. It's something that they still do with their children. There's nothing better than a good story. And so I hope you're going to enjoy this series. And before we start, I just want to say, do subscribe to my channel because you don't want to miss out on anything. Because I'm in for the long haul and I want to make sure that you get the most stunning stories to go to bed with at night or to listen to when you want to be one of those people sitting beside the fire and listening. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and let's get started. I hope you're going to enjoy the omnibus.
Dear Sarah and all your lovely listeners, it was January the 2nd, 1949, and an icy cold front from Canada collided with Arctic air from the south, punneling Colorado, Nebraska, Wyoming and the Dakotas with heavy snow, fearsome blizzards, unrelenting winds and sub-zero conditions. It was known as the Great White Death or the Storm of the Century, for anyone who crossed its path was not left unscathed, as this storm in some way left an indelible impression on the lives of many. In the years that followed, many reflected on that storm, as like many major events in our history, most remembered what they were doing when the snow thundered down that day. I stared out of the window of our farmhouse, hardly daring to believe how fearsome the weather was becoming. I could see a white world metamorphosizing before my eyes. Everything was swathed in white. Snow glistened, sparkled and twinkled under the light of the day, but a powerful wind with giant-like hands scooped up some snow in its grip, blowing it across the ground with a feisty vigour, and the whole farmhouse began to wobble, while windows rattled and shook precariously. I marvelled at how bedazzling everything looked, as the towering trees in the woodgrove were covered in white dustings of snow. Our barn roof looked like a gingerbread house under a veil of white frosting, which I thought was whimsically enchanting, like something out of a fairy tale. "It's one hell of a storm out there," said my father, staring out of the window. "I don't want you going out there," he said as he attended to the fire in the crate. "The most important thing we need to do is to keep the house lovely and warm." It seemed like our two cats agreed. Pegasus, who was a great big fat grey tabby with white paws, was lying across the sofa, resigning himself to staying indoors, as wisely he had no desire to brave the elements outside, while our ginger cat Marmalade took one look at the snow in disgust, firmly parking herself on the sofa with Pegasus, where the two cats groomed each other, falling into a deep sleep. Our home was wrapped in a blanket of silence, as the snow insulated the outdoors, apart from the occasional howling sound of the wind rattling at the windows, as a single shutter slammed against the house quite noisily. The telephone broke the tranquillity, as it rang off the hook. "Damn," said my father, dashing towards the phone. "Yes, speaking. Yes, it's him," he said, brushing his moustache unconsciously, something he always did without even being aware of it. "So they're poorly, are they? Right, I'll be over shortly." "Where you going, Dad?" I asked in horror, watching him put on his boots and overcoat. "You're not going out in that storm, are you? You can't. That's crazy." "I have to. It would seem that our neighbours' heifers are not in a good way. Farmer Foster's very worried about them. I need to check on them. I won't be long. In the meantime, take care of yourself. Keep yourself lovely and warm." "I'll be back very soon," he assured me, kissing me affectionately on the cheek, picking up his medical bag and calling our Weimaraner Max to join him, as the two of them were practically joined at the hip. My father took Max with him out on all his calls, He wagged his short grey tail enthusiastically, gave a couple of appreciative woofs as he followed my father out of the farmhouse into the snow. I heard my father getting into his truck, starting the engine up, slamming the door behind him, and driving away, his tyres whooshing down the snow-covered drive. Then there was silence, an airy quietness that was haunting. I was left alone, insulated and generously cushioned by a vast world of white. But I assured myself my father would be back very soon. My heart sank. I knew my dad was a brilliant vet, a man of great integrity, who would brave the worst conditions to help an animal in distress. When I was younger, I'd seen him risk his own life rescuing a frantic horse that was trapped in the mud, that was kicking its front legs so dangerously that one thrash of his hoof could have killed a man in a heartbeat. But my father managed to calm down the frantic horse, skillfully digging away the mud, so that it was finally set free. All these years later, that horse had never forgotten my father's kindness, and whenever he visited that horse farm, the horse called Silken Dream would come trotting up to him, nuzzling him affectionately. He had rescued a baby eagle once that had been thrown out of its nest by the other fledgling in a show of dominance for the survival of the fittest. It was so weak, but we'd nursed it back to health. I'll never forget the day we released it back into the wild. Once a year it would come back to visit us, perching on the large oak tree outside our home. And then once my father had acknowledged its presence, we would watch it soaring up in the sky in circles, and then finally flying away. It was his way of saying thank you to us. Over the years my father had earned an illustrious reputation as a vet, but I did hate it when he left the house to attend to his duties, especially in perilous conditions like this, when the unstable weather was as unpredictable and problematic as it was fierce, sparing little regard for those trapped in its wrath. The windy arms and sub-zero conditions of the weather was not something to be sneezed at. I was an only child, as my mother had died during childbirth, which was much more common than you imagined in those days. It had been a gruelling time for my father, as he was grieving my mother's loss, while celebrating my birth at the very same time. It was all my mother had ever dreamed of her entire life, to become an expectant mother. She had struggled to carry a baby to full term after having experienced a plethora of miscarriages. So when my mother had carried me for a full 9 months, they both had never envisaged things going so badly wrong. At least she got to hold me for the very first time, but she began to hemorrhage so severely they were unable to save her life. By all accounts, my mother was a remarkable woman who was passionate about animals, almost as much as my father was. Over the years, my father had raised me as his own. He had never replaced my mother. He told me once that he would never find anyone like her again, but I felt sad for him being on his own. But he seemed incredibly happy with his life, loved his job working with animals. The phone suddenly rang, and I hurriedly went to answer it. Was it my father, I wondered, telling me he was on his way back home and had attended to the neighbour's heifers? I was surprised to hear Pippa's voice, as she was the wife of the farmer my dad was visiting in the neighbouring farm. So why was she phoning me? I could feel my heart beating a little faster, my hands beginning to tremble. "Is everything all right, Pippa? Isn't Dad with you looking at your heifers right now? I mean, he did get there all right, didn't he?" There was a stiff, awkward silence at the other end of the phone. I heard Pippa's voice almost squeak. "Yes, your father got here fine, but I'm afraid your dad's had a bit of a freak accident. One of the cows kicked him in the head when he was examining her. Something like this hasn't happened before. I don't know what to say." "Is he going to be all right?" I asked. "Irene, don't worry," came Pippa's reassuring voice on the other end of the line. "He sustained a slight concussion, but otherwise he's absolutely fine. The doc wants to keep him under observation for a few days, but he'll be home with you soon, I promise. He believes it's best to keep him with us on the farm, not to move him under the circumstances, especially with the atrocious weather outside." "When can I see him?" "Soon, I'm sure. Your father's asked me to tell you to call your Aunt Gladys, to get her to come and stay with you in the meantime at the farmhouse. He doesn't want you to be out there alone in those weather conditions. Promise me that you'll call her." "Oh, I will. I want to know, is Max all right?" "Oh, yes, he's fine. He's having the time of his life with all our other dogs. They're running around the place like crazy." "So you will look after yourself?" "I will," I assured her. "Thanks for phoning. Send Dad my love. We'll do so. I put the phone down with tears of relief pouring down my cheeks. Poor Dad, I thought. Things could have turned out so differently. Thank goodness he was going to be fine. It was 3 and I found myself beginning to feel rather cold. I wrapped myself in more layers of clothing, stoking up the fire, warming up some hot chocolate and putting on the radio to hear the weather forecast. "And now for the weather report," said the commentator. "Emergency alert. Very dangerous hazardous conditions out there, folks. Make sure you're staying indoors, keeping lovely and warm. Blizzards and heavy snow are forecast in the next couple of hours. Wherever you are, get home as quickly as you possibly can. Not looking good out there, folks. It looks like a storm is brewing. Stay safe, whatever you do. Stock up with firewood. Keep cozy and warm. This is Como Radio, Nebraska, keeping you posted at all times." I was shocked. There was no way I was going to call Aunt Gladys. I didn't want to worry her about Dad unnecessarily. Besides, I was more than capable of looking after myself, I thought. I certainly didn't need a babysitter. I was too old for that. I was 15 years old, for goodness sake. I decided to bring in lots of firewood from the barn. It was so cold out there as the wind punnelled against my body, nearly blowing me over in the process, while icy chills permeated my clothes as I brought in handfuls of firewood, which I stacked by the fire. I then sat next to my 2 cats on the other end of the sofa, while I watched the fire crackling in the hearth. Slowly but surely the lids of my eyes grew heavy, and much like the cats, I drifted off into a deep sleep. I was awakened by the thumping, whooshing and whistling sound of the unruly, truculent winds blowing across the entire valley, becoming ruthlessly fierce and foreboding. Even the windows and doors began to jolt, quiver and rattle violently. This was quite some malignant snowstorm, I thought, but I had no clue just how untamed it was to become. The next day I looked out of the kitchen window. I was visibly dismayed, shaken and shocked by how heavy the snowfall had been overnight. The noisy, impetuous winds still prevailed. The whole farmhouse literally shook from their baleful wrath. I knew I wouldn't want to be out in this fearsome, dangerous weather that was without mercy. I switched on the radio to keep abreast with what was going on. "This is Radio Como, Nebraska, keeping you posted at all times. The eastern and southeastern parts of Nebraska have been hit hardest by these direful storms. There are reports of formidable 40-feet snowdrifts and animals that have frozen to death overnight. Snowplows have been deployed in various areas. Reports coming through suggest that many out there are marooned in their cars. Help is on its way, folks. No need to panic. Wherever you are, stay indoors. It's getting worse, folks, so keep yourselves lovely and warm." Wow, this was some fearsome storm, I thought. I'd never seen anything like this in all my life. The winds were getting worse. The snow outside our front door was 2.5 foot high. I'd never experienced snow like this. Once again I found myself staring outside the window. Despite the treacherous conditions and howling winds that literally whistled non-stop, I couldn't help thinking how beautiful everything was. The thick snow just carpeted the whole valley. It looked so magnificent. At that moment, despite the fact the visibility wasn't good, I could see the silhouette and shape of 3 people in the snow. I wondered who would be out there in these chaotic conditions. What are they doing, I wondered. Are they completely crazy? Off their heads, I wondered. I put on my heavy coat quickly, my snow boots, woolly hat and gloves, and ventured out of the front door. "Hi there," I called. "Is everything all right with you?" But my voice was washed away, subdued by the blustering, tempestuous winds. I don't think they even heard me. I got closer to the silhouettes of 3 people, heavily clad in thick winter coats. Well, so I thought at the time. I stopped dead in my tracks. These weren't people, I thought. What were they? Their silhouettes were huge, dense and dark, standing so dramatically against the white snow. I stood there and stared. I was so shocked by what I was seeing. I think I was so befuddled and taken off guard that any fearful or anxious thoughts had been vanquished. I knew they weren't totally human. They had ape-like influences to their appearance. They were exceptionally tall, easily over 7 feet, but the youngster was quite small at only being 2 feet in height. The male was exceptionally huge. He could have weighed about 800 pounds. Even his chest was about 5 feet across in circumference. The creatures were Herculean in girth, weight and stature, their bodies covered in long flowing dark brown hair that rather reminded me of a bear, only it was longer. If you saw them from a distance you could easily have mistaken them for bears, although to be fair I had perceived them to be human beings wearing thick coats. The big giveaway that these creatures weren't bears was that they were so human-looking. They of course had long arms that fell beyond their knees with human-like hands. Their heads were cone-shaped. I couldn't detect much of a neck, but the faces possessed some remarkable human-like qualities. They had flat noses, thin mouths, and deep-set dark eyes. Suddenly all three pairs of eyes were fixed on me intently. They studied me for a moment, then nodded at me, as if they were saying hello. I nodded back. They continued to walk, not even looking behind them once. I watched them literally glide over the snow with effortless ease, almost as if they were floating. Remember, this was snow that was several feet deep, so seeing them glide like that was absolutely remarkable. I saw them making their way towards my father's barn. Then they entered it. I realized suddenly they were looking for shelter to keep out of the elements. I felt happy for them being out of the cold, away from that horrible wind that wouldn't stop howling. I knew my father's barn was very cosy. It was initially a cabin that was converted into a barn, so it was extremely well insulated from the elements. I know it may sound odd to you and your listeners, but I was glad to not be totally alone. These creatures never once, not even for a brief second, made me feel remotely afraid. I felt strangely comforted that they were around, even safe, as weird as that may sound. Why I felt that way I don't know, but I did. Maybe in my gut I sensed that these creatures were never going to harm me. I learnt growing up that your gut never lies, so one word of advice, always listen to it. I loved watching the creatures every day. The first time I got firewood was my last time, as the male was so perceptive he would leave a pile of firewood outside the front door every day for me, which really made me realise how intelligent and generous these creatures are. In return, I'd throw apples in the snow and buttered homemade bread with peanut butter and jelly, which I would watch them eat with looks of great pleasure on their faces. On one occasion I saw the male creature carrying a big frozen cow, which he had slung over his shoulder, as if it was nothing. I could hardly believe anything could be so powerful and so strong. The first few days of the boisterous storm were absolutely terrible, with raging wind speeds up to 80 miles an hour. I gathered on the radio that 7 people lost their lives. Many farm animals froze to death in the bitter conditions. There were people who got trapped in their cars for over 3 days. One man described it as being worse than being in a concentration camp during the war. The snowplows would be forever on the go, as hours later they would be back ploughing up even more snow. Some snow had to literally be blasted away, as it had become as hard as cement. Cars and cows were found buried beneath snowdrifts, and in Harrison County the snowdrift was as high as a telephone pole. There were also weird phenomena reported during these hazardous conditions. One day an upside-down rainbow was seen in the sky. There were reports of thunder and lightning, as well as a lot of static electricity. One man noticed sparks coming out of 6 of his rifles, all at the same time. People came together and everyone helped each other from all walks of life, so it was a phenomenal time from a humanitarian point of view. As for me, I remained alone in the farmhouse for 2 weeks, until my father finally returned. He was surprised I'd been through those harrowing blizzards all on my own, but then again I hadn't entirely been on my own, had I? Once the weather receded, I didn't see the creatures again. When they left, I heard a wood knock on my door and a whistle. I watched them leave the barn with tears in my eyes. I knew I would miss them. A year later I found my dad's basket filled with orchard apples on our doorstep. No one knew who they were from, but I did. I knew the creatures were saying thank you to me. It's only in recent years, with all the television coverage and exposure, that I found out what those creatures were, and I now know they were Sasquatch. Is Bigfoot misunderstood? Possibly. I can't say. People have had terrifying encounters with Bigfoot, and good encounters. Mine was the latter. A truly joyous experience, one I shall never ever forget. So there you are, that's my story. Whether you believe it or not, that's fine, it's up to you. I know it happened. Bigfoot has a special place in my heart, and always will. He made the storm of the century a memorable and special time for me. I'm an old woman now with failing eyesight, but a mind still as sharp as it was when I was 15. At the old age home where I reside, I have a friend who claims to have a Bigfoot story all of his own, which he'd love to share with you and your listeners. My story never happened on the storm of the century, nor were there precarious winds blowing or snowy weather, as most of the events happened when the weather was sunny and bright. I shared my story with Irene at the old age home. Now it's a pleasure and privilege to share it with you. It's a story I've never forgotten and hold dear to my heart. I was about 12 years old at the time. My family lived in a rustic wooden cabin that was not without charm in Wyoming, not too far from the town of Hartsville, which was a town established in 1884 and named after Major Hart. I grew up with a family of 3 sisters and 2 brothers. Regretfully, now I am the only one sibling that's still alive today. Our family wasn't wealthy, so we lived in quite cooped-up conditions as our cabin was not terribly big, but it was cosy nevertheless. But what we lacked for in money, we more than made up for in love. As children, we didn't have many toys, but we made our own toy cars with cotton reels and wire. My mother made my sisters dolls out of corn cobs. She'd burned 2 holes on the cobs for eyes. We lived in a little valley surrounded by a backdrop of mountains and a large scattering of trees. One day my mother was hanging her washing out on the line. When she brought it back into the house after it had dried, she found that her skirt was missing. Next time it was a summer dress or a petticoat. It really was bizarre, but it was always my mother's stuff that went missing, none of ours. We didn't have any close neighbours, so we couldn't understand who was pinching my mother's washing. But whoever they were, the mysterious perpetrator had large feet. My mother was horrified to find an imprint in the ground that was so huge we couldn't imagine who could have had feet that large, and why the person was going around without shoes on. But my mother surmised that the poor man didn't wear shoes, as who in the world would sell shoes for feet that big? My mother said the person would have to have their shoes professionally made, which would cost them an arm or a leg or a pretty penny. We already knew a man who had his shoes made as his feet were oversized. It had cost him half of his salary. We all believed that some pervert with big feet was stealing my mother's washing. So everywhere we went, we were looking at people's feet, which meant that people kept giving us funny looks. Try looking at people's feet yourself and see exactly what I'm talking about. My father was incredibly uptight. He thought someone was fixated over my mother. Me and my brother played in the woodgrove a lot. One day we discovered this large nesting area made up of twigs and grasses, and in the nest we found all my mother's clothes wound up in the fibres of it. It was odd, but we never returned the clothes to my mother, as they were now in bad nick. We also decided not to tell her about our gruesome discovery, as it might make her unduly alarmed. Me and my brother thought some roughneck was living rough in the woods and had a secret crush on my mother. Weeks passed and my mother swore that while she was hanging the washing, she thought someone was spying on her, but she told us not to tell our father, as he would do his nut. By this time my father was convinced that someone was stalking my mother. He'd get hot under the collar, probably go after the stalker, all guns blazing, if he had his way. My mother was never afraid. She thought someone had a crush on her. She thought it was a harmless infatuation, and it didn't bother her at all. She was used to men paying her attention, as she was very pretty and had auburn hair, bright blue eyes and fair skin. Many of the men in town would always give her that approving look. My father hated that. He got very jealous and quite insecure that some wealthier man might whisk my mother away one day by giving her the finer things in life, the things he couldn't afford to give her. My mother would say to him, "Don't be so insecure, Percy. It's you I love and you alone." My mother knew exactly what my father could be like. It made her incredibly embarrassed. She told us kids once my father had got into a huge altercation with another man over her. He'd been looking at her in an inappropriate way, well, so my father thought, and he was incensed. He literally got into a heated fight with the man and walked away with a black eye and dislocated jaw. But the man fared a whole lot worse. He spent a couple of nights in hospital with a slight concussion. My father could certainly pack a punch with those fists of his. He was as strong as an ox, although to look at you would never have guessed it. The sheriff told my father to grow up, to fight his battles with words, not with his fists. He was lucky he didn't get into a whole lot more trouble. but the sheriff turned a blind eye to it, saying that as far as matters of the heart were concerned, men were capable of doing nonsensical, irrational things. One day when my mother was hanging out the washing, I crept out of the cabin to see who it was that was spying on her. I went the back way and sneaked into the woodgrove. That was when I saw the person who was spying on her. At first I saw nothing, but then I noticed this huge burly body that was swaying backwards and forwards as it was peering at my mother through a curtain of foliage. It was making a grunting sound. I remember thinking, is that a bear? But I don't think that's a bear. I mean, this thing was enormous, too big to be a bear. But then I realised that it had to be a human kind of creature, as it had human-like hands. I hid behind the tree until the creature turned around, when my mother returned indoors. I got a good view of him. At the time I didn't know what he was. He stood on 2 feet, was about 9 foot tall, 700 pounds, with a pyramid-shaped head. The creature was huge, with a human-like face and deep-set dark eyes. I now know today it was a Bigfoot. In those days I was completely stumped as to what it could be. It was absolutely ginormous. I decided when I returned home I would not tell my mother what I'd seen. Even though the creature was Herculean in size and very intimidating, I knew he was no threat to my mother. He just had a huge crush on her. In a way I thought it was kind of endearing, quite sweet really. I think he'd watched her hundreds of times before, was very shy, elusive and evasive, but stole her washing to feel close to her. I don't know why, but I felt protective towards the creature. I had haunting visions of my father stomping into the woodgrove and taking the creature on, killing him with his rifle, so I never said a single word. My mother knew I was checking the woodgrove to see who was spying on her that day, but I lied and told her I saw nothing. I remember her saying it was rather peculiar, because she felt as if she was being watched. I assured her it was all in her imagination, although for years her items of washing were continuously pinched. Another thing that was always bizarre was outside my mother's bedroom window. She would always find strange sticks, river stones, feathers and nests. We never knew where these curious things came from, but knowing what I do today, I would definitely say the creature was enamoured with my mother, gifting her with curious things from the forest. At the time my mother thought one of us kids was putting the stuff on her window ledge. Now I know differently. Another strange, curious thing happened in my home, when my mother brought home an antique mirror once. She'd bought it at an antique sale. She was thrilled with her purchase. She told us that as she was buying it from the dealer, an interfering, busybodying old woman who saw her buying the mirror warned her off the purchase, saying, "Don't buy that mirror, it's evil." My mother thought that it was ridiculous. Perhaps the woman secretly wanted it for herself. She brought the mirror home. My mother hung the mirror in the living room area of our cabin. The room suddenly became incredibly cold, with unexplainable temperature drops. Even when we stoked up the fire in the room, there would be isolated cold spots that you could physically feel. You could literally walk over to a spot in the room, and it would be like a round circle of air that felt as icy as a refrigerator. At the time we did not connect the dots to the mirror. But one day me and my mother saw this black smoke whirling around the room and then vanishing into the walls and disappearing before our eyes. It freaked us out so much. We didn't know what it was. My mother said to me, "Did you see that?" I nodded. I asked her what it was. She looked at me with alarmed eyes and said, "I wish I knew, but whatever it is, I don't think it's good." After a while we would notice things in our house would be misplaced, sometimes going missing for many weeks at a time, and then being found in peculiar places. For example, my mother found her golden locket in the sugar bowl, her lipstick in the tea box, and her rolling pin in the outhouse, which was all exceedingly odd. We started to notice the lingering smell of tobacco in the cabin. It was a pungent, aromatic smell. It really smelt as if someone had been smoking in the cabin, but no one smoked in our household, so it was very odd. One day my mother invited her friend over to tea, a lovely lady called Mrs. Walter Scott. They had enjoyed time together, and her friend said to my mother, "Who was that man in the top hat smoking a pipe while we were having tea?" My mother said to her, There was no one in our house smoking a pipe. Who you talking about? Oh, but there was. He was sitting on the upholstered chair just listening to us. I thought it was your father. As you can imagine, my mother was shocked, and that was when she was convinced that the mirror was haunted. So she put the mirror outside the house by a tree, with the full intention of getting my father to dispose of it. But the next day in the morning we found the mirror had been shattered and smashed into hundreds of pieces. We saw huge footprints around the scattered pieces of mirror, so the creature must have decided that the mirror really needed to be broken up. So there you are. That's my story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners. It was 1954. I was 15 years old at the time, living in West Virginia on a horse farm, where I was raised with my two brothers, Roth and Mick, under the careful supervision of both of our parents, who homeschooled us on the farm, raising us to be proficient in taking care of horses, as it was more than likely that we would follow in their footsteps. The farmhouse was a perfectly symmetrical box-shaped building that was very pleasing on the eyes, with 3 rows of perfectly aligned windows, with a green slate roof and a central front door, with a large wraparound porch that snuggled around the entire house, overlooking idyllic panoramic views of the breathtaking countryside, along with glorious meadows where horses grazed and frolicked at leisure. My father had inherited the farm from his father, who was still very much alive at the time, living on the farm with the family. He was a reticent, self-effacing, unassuming man that obscurely shrunk in the shadows, so much so that you hardly ever knew he was even there. But he was always attentively listening, observing everything that was going on. He rather reminded me of a wizened tortoise with a little shrunken face, weathered by spending too much time in the sun, while his discerning eyes were a deep brown colour, and they missed nothing. The sprawling farm was beautiful, with acres of flowering meadows hemmed in by white picket fencing. There were feed barns, tack rooms and stable blocks, along with an exercise ring. Our lives always smelt of hay, wood shavings, leather and horse manure. Growing up, my life would have been pretty close to perfect if it hadn't been for the unfortunate fact that my father was intentionally abusive towards me. He wasn't nursing a grudge or vendetta against the female gender by any manner of means, but I was the splitting image of my father's mother, which was something my father could never get his head around. Seeing me bobbing around the farm happily haunted him. He almost detested my smiling face. It was almost as if my laughter was actually tortuous to him. When he was a young boy, his draconian mother had tirelessly abused him with her pernicious, loose tongue that was unrelentingly cruel, brutish and unkind. Now he was returning the favour to me, as if in some way getting at me was lashing back at his own mother, whom he had despised for so long. Of course he made no secret as to why he had made my life a living hell. He would say I was the reincarnation of her, that I had returned from the grave to torment him all over again. It wasn't ever going to happen this time, he assured me, not on his watch, now that he was in charge, for he was the one wearing the boots. I danced on her grave when she died, he told me. I was so glad to see the back of her, and then you were born. Now, when I look at your face, I'm plagued with seeing my mother every day of my life, all over again, as if the good Lord is punishing me. I had seen photographs of my grandmother. It was hauntingly airy how much I looked like her. No one could dispute this fact, although my brothers and mother would say there was no such thing as reincarnation. They even chastised my father for taking his grievances out on me. But he did. I could discern the heartless hatred, visibly perceiving the hostile, vicious look in his brown eyes whenever he studied me from across the dinner table. His body would visibly stiffen. His jawline would become tight with tension. A deep frown would break out on his face. Sometimes he would even puff like a dragon when I was around, as if smoke was coming out of his nostrils. It might as well have been. Never a kind word came out of his lips for me. I began to experience my father's wrath. This was payback for what his mother had done to him as a boy. I was to understand that she had sometimes locked him up in the closet for several hours at a time when he'd done something that had really upset her. I can't imagine how terrifying that must have been for a vulnerable little boy who was terribly afraid of the dark. Worse still, her sharp, cold-blooded tongue, which may as well have been forked, had tirelessly whipped him with her murderous words, crushing his heart with their poisonous venom. Yet why should I suffer as a result of what my father's mother had done to him years before? I may have looked exactly like her, but I was not her reincarnation. But for some reason, my father absolutely believed that I was. It would seem that even my grandfather had been under the control of this formidable sadistic woman, as he never once intervened in his wife's unreasonable behaviour towards his own son. Instead, he was a quiet man who had busied himself in the running of the farm, wilfully turning a blind eye to his wife's manic rages. Ostensibly, my father had almost despised him for ignoring his mother's unreasonable, obstinate behaviour. But once his mother had died, his father had apologised profusely to him. His mother died on a riding accident where she'd fallen off a horse, sustaining massive hemorrhaging to the brain. It would seem after her passing, not much grieving had occurred in that small town. Even her own husband didn't shed a tear, and admitted as much. For years her gravestone stood in an untended, abandoned part of the farm, gathering moss and lichen, never so much as receiving even a scant offering of petals over the gravesite. All had remembered her as an intolerant woman who wore her grey hair in a tight bun, as well as a severe expression on her face every day of her life. Many claimed to have seen a shadowy figure when riding past the gravesite. People believed it could be her ghost, so everyone avoided that spot like the plague. Even strange orbs had been spotted there at night. When she was alive, the horses on the farm had given her a wide girth, as animals are remarkably sensitive to human energy. "You must understand, my son, I was under your mother's thumb. She was a formidable, vexatious woman. If I had intervened in how she treated you, that woman would have killed me, buried me under the patio," his father had told him. "You know she would have done so, son." At that they both shared a private laugh together, as both son and father could easily visualize the malignant witch-like woman burying him under the patio, covering up all the evidence of his death, while fobbing off the police with her persuasive, eloquent lies. This seemed to amuse both of them greatly. The joke was unbecomingly macabre, but it somehow broke the ice between the two of them, and son and father had grown close over the years since she had died. My mother was a good woman who saw how contrary my father's attitude was towards me. I was a perpetual reminder to him of his mother's wrath. Now he was the one filling his mother's shoes, treating me with equal disdain, working me harder on the farm than either of my brothers, whipping me with his vicious words. Presumably he had become like the very woman he despised. The abused had become the abuser. There was a huge dissimilitude with the way he spoke to me, as to the way he treated my brothers. The discrimination was very pronounced. He'd call me harebrain, gollywog, little brains. Come over here right now. Why have you not mucked out the stables yet? Get a move on, will you? Stop dithering, lazy bones. One day my brother took me to one side, giving me a generous handful of cash. "Take Dad's old truck. Leave the farm at once, sis. I'm tired of seeing Dad profanely abuse you. I can't stand the way he demeans, dishonours and degrades you, calling you all kinds of nasty, humiliating names. Oh, it's not right. I can't allow myself to sit back, seeing Dad treat you in this disparaging, contemptuous way. It's grossly unfair. You deserve a much better life, sis. You can make a fresh start somewhere else. If anyone can do it, you can. I want you to be happy. I've heard you crying yourself to sleep at night. I worry about you all the time, sis. I need you to leave for your own sanity. I don't want to think that you could become a gibbering wreck later on in life because Dad patronised you so much when you were young. It's very wrong what he's doing to you. But where will I go? Drive to Lexington in Kentucky, sis. There are lots of horse farms around there. I'm sure you'll be able to find work. As I said, if anyone can do it, you can do it. Tell your potential employers you want room and board, that you have a plethora of experience working with horses. They can speak to me if they want a reference. He took me into his arms, giving me a big hug. Over the years, it's made me cringe seeing Dad's abysmal treatment of you. I know there's a brighter future out there for you, sis. Please stay in touch. Let us know where you are. I'll tell Mum you're safe, not to worry about you. Dad will be glad when you're gone. I hate to say it, but it's true. I'm scared. Our farm is all I've ever known. I don't want to leave you or Mum. Be brave, sis. You can't stay here, you know you can't. I worry that one day Dad's words will turn physical. That day, he stammered, he could potentially hurt you, sis. Even though it could be unlikely to happen, anger can have a terrible effect on people. It can turn violent. So there I was with a handful of cash and my father's battered old truck that he would be unlikely to miss. I packed a small, rather battered-looking suitcase that had seen better days with some of my more practical clothes, and off I went into the wide blue yonder, hoping I wouldn't be caught without a license. Let me assure you, for a 15-year-old girl, it was a terrifying prospect, but I knew my brother was absolutely right. My father's abusive ways were getting worse the older I became, as I seemed to remind him more and more of his mother. I didn't know how I was going to find a job on a horse farm. I was only 15 with not much meat on my bones. I decided to take the bull by the horns and approached several horse farms who turned me away, viewing me suspiciously and telling me that they didn't need my help. They seemed sceptical that a young girl like myself could even be an asset to their farm. My heart was heavily laden. I was certain I'd have to return home to West Virginia with my tail between my legs, admitting defeat. The following day I arrived at a horse farm run by an elderly couple who had no children of their own. "I'm looking for work, ma'am," I told the old woman. "Board and lodgings, if I may. I know I'm slight, but I promise you, ma'am, I'm really good with horses." "I don't doubt that for a moment," said the woman with a bright twinkle in her piercing blue eyes. "I can see you have a gentle spirit, dear. Horses respond to that very favourably. Come with me," she said, leading me into her kitchen and putting on the kettle. "What's your name, girl?" "Lydia Pierce," I told her. The old lady placed a hot mug of tea in my hands. She sat down opposite me, looking intently with her eyes, as if she was reading me like a book. "You're running away from something, aren't you, girl? You tell me your story. I'm a good listener, I really am." I nodded, tears springing into my eyes. "It's my father. He hates me." The woman looked aghast. "But that makes no sense at all. Why would your father hate you? He's very blessed to have such a beautiful, precious daughter like you. Does he not realise that? Can he not see that you're a gift from God? Me and my husband Howie tried for years to have children of our own, but the good Lord never blessed us with a child. I was barren like Hannah in the Bible, crying out for a baby, but the Lord did not bless my womb. But then there are people like your father who are gifted with a child, which is a loan to them from the good Lord, which he's expected to honour and to cherish and love with his whole heart. But instead he behaves disgracefully. It's like throwing a present back at someone who's brought you something terribly nice. It's offensive, very rude. He thinks I'm the reincarnation of his mother whom he hated, so he's very scornful towards me, to extract his revenge. I'm the spitting image of her in every way, you see. My mannerisms, the way I laugh, my physical appearance. It's very unfortunate. Believe me, I'd give anything not to look like her, especially since she was such a despicable person." "That's shocking, dear. It seems your father is the despicable one here. What about your mother? Doesn't she stand up for you, fight your corner for you? I'd never put up with Howie if he was disrespectful towards our daughter, if we were fortunate enough to have one, based on some misguided perceptions. She tried. She's done her best. So have my brothers. But they simply can't get through to him. He's so bull-headed and bloody-minded. It was my brother that begged me to leave, to find a job. They're worried that my father's ruthless tongue could turn violent towards me one day. They could be right. You see, the older I get, the more I remind him of his mother. I tell you what, I'll write to your mother. Let her know that you're safely under my charge, and that you're fine. She must be worried sick about you. You can move into our farmhouse into the spare room. It seems that God has sent us a daughter after all," she said, smiling joyously. So you'll give me work on your farm with your horses? I'll do more than that, dear. I'll give you the home that you've always deserved, the home you were meant to have, a home filled with laughter, happiness and love. I know the good Lord has sent you our way. It's never too late to have a daughter. There are no words to describe the kindness of Enid and her husband Howie, who took me under their wings like the child they never had, showering me with their unconditional love. We became a close family. From time to time I would get the occasional sporadic visit from my mother and my two loving brothers, who were grateful to see me under the care of two such kind, generous people, who adored me as if I was their own flesh and blood, while Howie became for me a true and loving father. "I'm so thankful to you," my mother told Enid, "for taking care of my daughter. I don't trust my husband with her. I would have these dreadful nightmares that one day he would whack her on the back of the head and make her just disappear." Enid was visibly shocked. "You think he could have done that to his own daughter?" she asked, looking appalled. My mother looked awkward. She let out an uncomfortable cough. "Well, you never know what people are capable of, do you?" she had said, "when they're filled with hatred. Even the nicest people in the world are capable of doing contemptible, detestable things. I am of the opinion that if the bull is seeing red, get rid of the red so that the bull will cease his attack. My husband saw red every time he looked at Lydia. The wise, sensible thing to do was to get Lydia safely out of the way. It's so much better to be safe than sorry. Isn't it a bit extreme, your husband hating his daughter so much? All this nonsense about reincarnation. It does seem a bit over the top to me." "It isn't to my husband," my mother explained. "Lydia's presence in our home has tormented him, as everything about her reminds him of his mother. It's like my Lydia was haunting his life, only she wasn't a ghost from the dead, but a ghost in his present life. She made his past come thundering back, and rekindled all those hurtful memories for him of being abused by his mother. By all accounts, she was a dreadful woman, a real bully with a tongue on her so sharp she could cut glass. She undermined my poor husband so much with her cruel words. She told him he would never amount to much, that he had a brain the size of a pea, and she rued the very day that he was born. The spiteful woman locked him up in the closet, denying him food for an entire day. She was a nasty piece of work. I know it seems unreasonable, his treatment of Lydia, but you must understand she is the splitting image of my husband's mother." "That is most unfortunate for Lydia," said Enid. "But I do believe your husband's treatment of her has been outrageous. Two wrongs certainly don't make a right." "Oh, I quite agree with you. But to tell you the truth, I feel so relieved for us not to have Lydia on the farm with us. My husband is a much happier man these days. He's been able to put the past behind him now that Lydia doesn't keep reminding him of his mother. We also feel much better knowing that Lydia is safe with you. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your kindness in regards to this matter." "We love having her here," said Enid. "I have 80 members of staff on this farm. They all adore her. She's been a blessing to me and Howie. We have no children of our own. And as for the horses on the farm, they adore her. We have a difficult stallion that has been unpredictable, but your daughter is the only one who has got through to him. I found her sleeping in his stall the other day, as he was frightened of the storm. All the grooms thought she'd be trampled on by the temperamental horse, but not so. The stallion has connected with her in a remarkable way. It seems your daughter's reassuring words calmed him down considerably. She's a natural with horses. All the staff are amazed and impressed how the horse has become so much calmer thanks to Lydia. We're hoping he'll sire the next Kentucky Derby winner. We're thinking of breeding him with one of our mares." "And why not?" my mother said. "You've got a fine farm here." I loved spending time on the horse farm with Lydia and Howie. I enjoyed spending time with the horses and the staff on the property. Before long I didn't miss my own home, as Enid and Howie's traditional farmhouse had become home to me. It was much grander than our horse farm in West Virginia. The stables were state-of-the-art. They owned some of the finest breeding stallions in the county. One day a woman arrived on our farm with a temperamental stallion in her trailer, one that was so magnificent it took my breath away, but for some reason it had been abused, and so it didn't trust humans at all, especially not men. Its name was Fire Dancer. From the moment I laid eyes on the horse, my heart melted, but I could see the fear in his eyes, as he surveyed humans with a wariness that was tangible, and when men came near him, he would rise up on his back legs and kick the ground fiercely. "What happened to this horse?" asked Enid. "You don't want to know," said the woman. "He's been very badly abused, traumatized by the previous owner. Despicable man. The horse was thankfully confiscated from him. I told the authorities I'd find a perfect home where he'd receive the love and care he needs. I thought of you and Howie. I'm glad you thought of us. He's a fine thoroughbred," said Enid. "I know a young lady who will get through to this stallion. Her name's Lydia Pierce. She connects with horses like no one I know, especially broken ones. Maybe that's because she's broken herself, so she gets them." "Well, that's the best news ever, Enid. I knew you and Howie would work a plan for the stallion." It was decided that I was the one that would help Fire Dancer. I knew firsthand what it was like to be abused. It was easy for me to communicate with difficult animals. It was very clear that Fire Dancer was beginning to trust me, and me alone. I was the only person that could ride him. He would nuzzle me, eat apples from my hand, rub his nose affectionately against my face. We had developed an unlikely bond. I would regularly take him for rides along some fabulous hiking trails. Everyone was stunned, as the horse was becoming so much calmer and more serene. I would wash his coat, brush him, talk to him, feed him, and he began to trust me with his whole heart. The transformation in his demeanour was nothing short of miraculous. One day when Howie and Enid had gone away for the weekend to visit Howie's sister, I had decided to stay behind at the farmhouse. I knew in normal circumstances that Enid would not be best pleased with me taking a ride so late in the afternoon with Fire Dancer, as she would have considered that a foolish thing to do. But what she didn't know would not hurt her. I'd always fancied taking a late afternoon ride. Besides, Fire Dancer needed some exercise. I'd be back soon, I told myself, and nobody would be any the wiser. How wrong I was. Fire Dancer seemed thrilled to be saddled up. He was looking forward to the ride as much as I was. The two of us were a great team. The bond that I had developed with Fire Dancer had grown in leaps and bounds. She was completely reliant on me. We were trotting together happily down a hiking trail, one that I'd never taken before. It was rather unfamiliar to me. There was a still wind blowing against my face. It was fall, and the bountiful trefoil swathed the ground in a rich, luxuriant, golden russet carpet of crunchy leaves that rustled in the wind. It was a magically enchanting afternoon, but it was folding away very quickly. The sun was beginning to set. The whole valley was dappled in a rich tangerine orange sunset. It was so incredibly beautiful trotting under the canopy of trees down that hiking trail. In a trice the landscape became gloomy. The sky took on a grey hue. The trees became dark, dense silhouettes, standing up tall and proud against a deepening sky. And that was when I saw several plastic bags blowing on a tree. Someone had attached them to a tree like balloons. I don't know if they had placed them there deliberately, but the sight of these plastic bags blowing backwards and forwards against the breeze, combined with the whooshing sound they were making, scared the living daylights out of poor Fire Dancer. Calm down, I told the horse, but she reared up on her back legs. She began to gallop frantically, losing any sense of direction, as terror infused her body. She slipped into an adrenal fight and flight response. I went flying off her, landing on the ground in a crumpled heap, while Fire Dancer bolted away as fast as she could. My guess was she'd fled back to the farm at a very fast gallop. She would soon realise I wasn't with her once she calmed down. I tried to get up from my position, but my left side was literally killing me. I knew I had to have broken something quite badly. I was beginning to regret impulsively taking Fire Dancer for a ride so late in the afternoon. It was rather reckless of me. No one knew I was out with her. I was in the middle of the hiking trail. I knew I had to manoeuvre myself to the embankment, so I slid my body along the ground, crying out in agonizing pain with every movement, as shooting spasms darted through my body. I had no choice but to wait until someone came to rescue me. It could be a long time before anyone realised I was missing. In the meantime, it looked like I'd be spending the night in the woodgrove. It was getting a lot cooler now that it was autumn, but luckily I wouldn't freeze to death. Not in this weather. I was shivering, though, but it wasn't that cold. My only concern was that a wild animal like a mountain lion could be loitering around. I would be easy pickings for such a formidable beast. I managed to find a long stick that I could use to defend myself. I guess it made me feel better, not that it would be much of a defence anyway. There are no words to describe the pain that I was going through. Truly, it was unlike anything I've ever experienced before or since, even after I had my baby. I closed my eyes tightly and prayed for God to keep me safe. I tried not to focus on the pain. That was an exceedingly difficult thing to do. But somehow I managed to fall into a deep sleep. I think the shock of the fall must have knocked me out to a degree. The sleep offered me a fleeting respite from the throbbing pain. I remember waking up to the strange grunting sound. I looked up to see this tall, dark creature staring at me. It was the strangest looking creature I've ever seen in my life. Its face was like that of a man, but its body was like that of a bear. You could be forgiven for thinking a man had stepped into an oversized bear suit, yet I could tell the body of this creature was real, as no human being on this planet I know could have been as tall and wide as he was. Besides, I could see the grey skin beneath his hair, as well as the very defined muscle tension, which was incredibly impressive. This creature was easily 9 foot tall, 700 to 800 pounds, possibly 3 feet wide across the shoulder area or more. He had human-like hands and feet. I could tell the creature was very intelligent as he studied me through his deep, dark brown eyes, as if he was trying to fathom what was wrong with me. He never asked me that specific question because obviously he couldn't speak my language, but I felt as if he did. I told him that I'd fallen off a horse. I used my hands to imitate the horse. I pointed to the hoof marks on the ground. I think he understood because he grunted. I demonstrated to him that I could not get up. The creature grunted again. He then let out a long whistle. And then gliding through the trees came another one of these strange creatures in response to that whistle. The other creature was a female with breasts. The two creatures began to engage in an earnest conversation together, as if they were discussing what they should do with me. I sensed they felt that in some way I was their responsibility. They spoke together in an audible language backwards and forwards over and over again, as if they couldn't agree on something. Finally, the female nodded her head, watching me as the male lifted me up into his arms. I should have been terribly afraid given his great size and girth, but you can tell when something's trying to help you, and I sensed that these creatures were doing just that. The female creature pointed in 2 directions, to the right, and I shook my head as no, and to the left, and I nodded. They both knew that I was from the horse farm on the left-hand side of the valley. The creature carried me in his arms. He seemed worried about hurting me. I pointed to my leg and let out some really bad whimpers as the pain went shooting through my leg. For a while the male looked hesitant, locking eyes with the female, as if to say, "Is this a good idea? Perhaps we should watch over her until human help arrives." The female seemed insistent that he should take me, so he obeyed. I felt a huge relief as he glided down the horse-riding trail, with the female by his side. She ran with us. The creature carried me in his arms so gently. He never jolted my body once. If he had done so, I would have almost certainly winced in pain. I could feel the cool breeze blowing against my face, hear the rise and fall of his heartbeat. He also breathed exactly like a horse, which I found really rather amusing. I could smell the scent of the earth on him, mixed with the scent of a human sweat, but it wasn't offensive by any manner of means. I could see that to this remarkable creature I was as light as a feather. He carried me effortlessly through the gates, down the long drive. It was quite dark, but the outside lights were on, so the silhouettes of the barns and the stable block were clearly visible, while there were lights on in some of the groomsmen's cottages. Of course, the farmhouse where I lived with Howie and Enid was all in darkness, indicating that no one was at home. I pointed to the farmhouse and to the front doorstep, and they put me down there. I said thank you to the creatures. They stood there as if they were still worried about leaving me out there. I didn't think I could expect these creatures to take me directly into the house. The key was under the mat. I told them I'd be fine, and they both looked at each other and then at me. I remember the golden dark brown eyes looked into mine, I felt as if they were saying, "Are you sure you're going to be all right?" I nodded. The creatures looked bemused and seemed uncertain. They glided past one of the groom's cottages that was close to the main house. I was to learn later that they threw a couple of rocks at the front door. The groom came out of the cottage in time to see two dark silhouettes disappearing and slipping into the trees. What the heck was that, he wondered. I could see the groomsman with his torch wandering around his yard. I shouted out to him, "Danny, is that you?" The groomsman came bounding from his cottage, having heard my voice, with Fire Dancer having heard me too, trotting behind him. He was no worse for wear from his adventure. "What the hell happened?" asked Danny. "Why is Fire Dancer out and not in his stable? Why are you sitting on the front doorstep?" "I can't walk," I explained. "I fell off Fire Dancer. I think I've broken my leg. I can't move it. It's hurting so much. It's not aligned correctly." The groomsman looked mystified. "But how did you get here if you couldn't walk?" he asked. "What possessed you to go riding the horse so late? Enid and Howard will not be pleased with you." "It's a long story. Please don't tell them. Don't tell them I went riding so late." "Fair enough, but we need to get you to hospital right now." To cut a long story short, I'd broken my femur really badly and sprained my ankle. Enid and Howard rushed to see me in hospital in a frantic state. "What on earth happened to you?" they asked. I told them I had fallen off Fire Dancer, and two strange hairy-looking creatures had rescued me. They had alerted the groomsman at his cottage to my presence. "You mean a creature that looks like a human covered in hair?" Enid asked. "That's right. I've seen one of them before," she said, "when I was riding my horse down the trail. I remember getting this creepy feeling that I was being watched. My horse became very nervous and reactive. That was when I saw this creature standing behind the trees. I could see this large body covered in long flowing hair. It was studying me curiously with these bright brown eyes. I didn't know what to make of it. It looked so human." "That's right," I said. "That's exactly what the creatures look like." "How extraordinary! To think these creatures rescued you like that. This is an incredible story." To cut a long story short, I did get to see my father before he died. I went to visit him at my old home. I was shocked by how frail he had become. I wasn't sure it was a good idea to see him, but according to my mother, he wanted to make his peace with me before he died. I remember trembling as I entered his room. I hadn't seen him in many years. "Come over here, Lydia," he said. "Let's have a look at you." He seemed surprised as he ran his eyes over me. "You don't look so much like my mother any more," he chuckled. "That's because I'm not her. I never was." "I'm sorry, child. I wasn't good to you when you were growing up. You looked so much like my mother. I couldn't stand the very sight of you. It was like my past came back to haunt me. I'm very sorry I drove you away." "I'm not," I said. "I've had a very happy life. I've never wanted for anything." "I just want you to forgive me for the way I treated you. I need to go to the grave with peace in my heart." "I forgive you. Believe me, I do. Despite everything, I do think I understand why you treated me the way you did." Indeed, I absolutely had no regrets about how my life panned out. Enid and Howard had become my parents to me. I loved them with my entire heart. They left their horse farm to me in their will, as they considered me their daughter, which now my son manages today. So sometimes the things in life do have a remarkable habit of working out. On my farm there have been occasional sightings of Bigfoot to this very day. Personally, I haven't got a bad word to say about the creatures. I will never forget how those unlikely creatures rescued me from falling off my horse. Not only did they leave me outside my own home, but having realised no one was in, seeing a light on in the groomsman's cottage, they threw rocks at the house so that they could alert him to my presence. They showed initiative and emotional intelligence, and for that I shall never forget their kindness. I never saw those Bigfoots again, but believe me, I can never forget them. So there you are. That's my story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, it was 1987. My editor had been on my back to give her the first chapter of my novel. I had fobbed her off with all kinds of elaborate over-the-top excuses, but time was running out fast. The pressure to produce something substantial was escalating. I need your chapter first thing in the morning, and a rough synopsis and overview of your next story," she had told me with a rather demanding authoritarian tone to her voice. "Of course," I had said in a light, cheerful, sanguine voice that managed to disguise the inquietude I was actually feeling. "I'll get a courier to drop it off to you first thing in the morning," I said. "I've already completed it," I lied improvidently. The imprudent lie had slipped off my tongue so easily. Who was I kidding? I'd managed to produce 5 novels over the past 3 years, but this time I was truly stumped. I was drawing blanks. I didn't have a clue what I would write about next. There's nothing in the world that is worse for a writer than staring at a blank piece of paper in your typewriter. Procrastination had become my biggest companion over the last few days. I'd managed to find other things that needed doing, like unexpected random trips to the shops, where for some reason I needed that biological washing powder more than ever. Then another time I decided that the bed in my front yard needed weeding, something that had never been important to me before, as it suddenly seemed to be now. Short of being tied down to the desk with a pair of shackles, I was avoiding writing my synopsis like the plague. I now knew things were very serious. If I really wanted to make it as an author, I was going to have to get my act together fast. But what the heck was I going to write about? That was the $100 million question. The doorbell to my Victorian semi-detached home was ringing. I quickly went to answer it. I lived in a pretty leafy neighbourhood outside Seattle, next to a long row of semi-detached houses, all close to each other, but pretty and unique in their own right. The street was lined with oak trees on either side of the asphalt road, but the area behind all the backyards beyond 200 feet was heavily forested with ponderosa pines and Douglas fir trees, along with a plethora of exciting hiking trails. So for all the residents of the properties on our street, the forest was almost an extension of our homes, as in those days it hadn't been bulldozed, as regretfully it is now. I opened the door to be greeted by a door-to-door salesman. I shrank back in the doorway, wishing that I hadn't answered it so eagerly. I knew I was going to have to pretend to be interested in his sales spin. I managed a fake smile. "Hello, madam. Good morning to you. A very fine day it is," said a tall, lanky man with brown, mousy hair and piercing, deep brown eyes, who was staring at me intently. "Can I interest you in some organic cleaning products? They're very, very good. Biodegradable, environmentally friendly, with no carcinogenic effects. We use only the best, purest, finest essential oils in our products to ensure the smells add mood-enhancing benefits to your home. Fresh, fragrant smells that are beneficial to the health and very agreeable too, if I might say so." I remembered exactly what this was about. It was ex-cons selling organic cleaning products door to door. A project that was going remarkably well, was designed to help lift ex-cons out of their lives of crime onto the straight and narrow pathway, encouraging them to develop those quintessential entrepreneurial skills. We had been informed in the area about this amazing project, encouraged to support these young men, to help them change their lives. In a trice, I was feeling very irritated by the sales spin. I hated it when people tried to sell me stuff that I did not have any intention of buying. But I was beginning to feel that nudging feeling that buying something was the right thing for me to do. "Now, this particular product, ma'am, you don't want to be without it. You can use it on your kitchen countertops. It's got real lemon oil in it. It smells amazing. It'll leave your kitchen smelling fresh like lemons. Everybody loves this product. It is our best seller." "Well, I'll take the lemon cleaner then, and that'll be all." As far as I was concerned, that was enough. I was doing my civil duty. "Are you absolutely sure, madam? I can't persuade you otherwise to purchase anything else. I mean, I've got an excellent patchouli hand wash for disinfecting your hands. I can give you a very good discount on it. It smells absolutely amazing. Everybody loves it." "No, it's fine. That'll be all. I'm terribly busy." "Oh, you work from home then?" asked the man, raising his brow curiously. "That is very cosy. Most people would kill to work from home." "Well, it's not as cosy as it sounds. I'm an author. There are distinct drawbacks in being an author, I assure you. It's not all hunky-dory. I wish it was. It can have its extreme disadvantages, like vacillating and shilly-shallying around when you should be working. I'm very good at that procrastination lark. Why was I telling him all this? I couldn't even imagine. He was a door-to-door salesman, for goodness sake, not my pastor whom I was confessing my deadly sins to. "Well, that is very impressive," he said, rubbing his moustache reflectively. "I'm a very big reader myself. I enjoy George Orwell, Daphne du Maurier, Oscar Wilde. Have I read any of your work by any chance, do you think?" I flushed with embarrassment. The young man was mentioning renowned, famous authors that made me look like a fly in the ointment. I knew I was a small-time author. It was unlikely the man had ever heard of me. "No, you would never have heard of me," I assured him. "I'm not up there with the greats, I'm afraid. I write romantic fiction." "Nothing wrong with that, madam. Thank you for your time," he said, taking my money, tucking it into the back pocket of his jeans, as he picked up his cleaning supplies. "Are you sure I cannot tempt you to the patchouli hand wash?" "No, I'm really fine," I said, stiffly closing the door behind me, but first watching him walk over to the neighbour's house. I was heartily relieved to see the man walking away. I always felt on edge with people from the wrong side of the track. It wasn't an inverted snobbery, I assure you. It was a trust issue for me. I mean, could you blame me? He could have knocked his grandmother down the staircase for all I knew, or held up a bank at gunpoint and scared people half to death. You could never be sure. I observed his jeans were very loose on him. His sweater looked very baggy. I didn't feel comfortable having an ex-con standing outside my door. It really unsettled me. I didn't know what he'd been incarcerated for. You could never be too careful. As I went indoors and placed the lemon spray on my counter next to the sink, I reflected on the man's story. Why had he ended up in jail, I wondered. And then it occurred to me that he had a story to tell. And boy, did I need a story. Common sense abandoned me like a balloon on the wind. I spontaneously ran out of my front door towards the man. He was already at the next-door neighbour's door and was about to knock. The man looked up at me and smiled cheekily, showing a set of slightly yellowing teeth, possibly stained from too much coffee or nicotine, I thought. I could smell cigarettes on him, a slight sweaty odour. He possibly hadn't bathed in a long time. "You want the patchouli hand wash, madam, after all? Is that it? I knew you would change your mind," he grinned cheekily. "This is very good stuff, madam. You won't regret it. I knew you wouldn't be able to resist. No one can." "I don't want your cleaning stuff, but I will buy your story." The man looked confused. "What story, ma'am? I don't know what you're talking about." "Your story. I'd like you to come back to my home. Tell me your personal life story. I'll pay you for your trouble. I mean, you went to prison, didn't you? You must have a story to share. How you ended up there. And what your childhood was like growing up." "You want my life story? And you'll pay me for it?" "That's right. I'll pay you $100. Now that was very good money back then. He whistled. $100? You'll pay me $100? I nodded. I need a story for my editor. I need a story now. Fair enough, said the man, giving me a grin. I've got a story and a half for you, madam, he said, lifting up his products and following me back to my house. I don't think you'll be disappointed. What was I thinking? I needed a really good story, but leading a mysterious, strange young man into my home with a history of crime behind him wasn't the wisest decision on my part. But I did have a tendency to flippantly blow all caution to the wind, and on this occasion prudence had deserted my sense of vigilance, as I had much more to gain than lose. It would seem over the course of my life I had done some seriously crazy things, gone home with a stranger from a late-night bar, waking up in an unfamiliar bed. I'd hitchhiked on several occasions as a youngster, been picked up by some seriously dubious, questionable characters, so I hadn't lived a sheltered life by any manner of means. But bringing home a mysterious man like this, by all accounts an ex-con, was a reckless thing to do. But in an incongruous way, while it terrified me, it also gave me a huge thrill. And an idea of getting a good storyline out of him was the cherry on the cake. "Nice place you've got here, madam," said the man. "My name is Braden, by the way. Braden Harris. And I'm Carly Pembleton," I told him. "Do you live here alone?" he asked me. "Or do you have a significant other?" I did have. He moved out a year ago. We got divorced, I regret to say. "Well, he wasn't the right man for you then, was he? It's a meeting of minds between two people. That's what I always say. It's not just a physical attraction. It's a connection. If you don't have that, everything crumbles." "It was another woman. He had an affair." "It's as I say, a meeting of minds. You weren't clearly on the same wavelength. That's why he cheated. That's why people always cheat. They're just not on the same wavelength, that's all." "Can I get your coffee before we start?" I asked him. "That would be terribly nice, Carly. I hope you don't mind my being over-familiar, calling you Carly. Milk with 2 sugars, please." "No, please call me Carly. I never stand on ceremony." I watched the man staring out of my kitchen window, viewing the backyard of my home. "Nice trees you've got in your yard, Carly, but it certainly needs a good going over. I see you've got a forest in the back of your property. I imagine you must get deers eating your apples when they're in season." "I do, as it happens. I also get raccoons ferreting around in the bins, but I kind of like them. They've got such cute faces. I sometimes feed them." "Your apple tree needs pruning big time, I can see." I ignored his comments, directing him to the kitchen table, pulling out a pen and paper from the drawer. "You don't mind me taking notes?" "Of course not," he said, taking a sip of coffee. "You've got very good taste. I like the way you've furnished this place. It's stylish. Not that I've ever been big on material things. In the past, I've stolen what I've needed." "Thanks for saying that. Saying that my stuff is stylish, that is. But I assure you it's very bog-standard stuff. I'm not earning the kind of money to splash out on expensive designer gear. I wish I was. Shall we get started with the story?" "Well, let's do that then. When I was about 6 years old, I saw my father kill my mother. That was the first event that really screwed me up." "You what?" I gasped, hardly daring to believe I was hearing right. I wasn't expecting this. And the matter-of-fact way in which he told me this I found rather discomposing, I assure you. "He called her out into the backyard, whacked her over the head with the back of his trowel. It happened in the early evening. I saw the whole thing. I remember I was eating a fish finger at the time. Funny how your mind makes you remember quirky details like that. I think he told her he wanted to show her a yard shrub, and she bent down to look, and wallop, he slammed her so hard at the back of the head with a thunderous blow. My mother fell backwards onto the ground. Her eyes were glazed over like a dead fish. It was over for her in seconds. She didn't suffer much. It was a good way to go. Lights out like that. She didn't feel a thing. I ran over to her. I said, 'Mummy, wake up,' but she didn't respond. It was very confusing for me. I was so terribly young. I didn't understand what was going on. I said to my father, 'Mummy won't wake up.' He looked up at me and pointed to the sky and said, 'Mummy was never going to wake up. She had gone to heaven.' I started crying, 'But I want my mummy.' And he said, 'Tough, she's gone. She's not coming back, son.'" "Are you winding me up? Did this really happen?" "Do I look like I'm joking?" "You saw him doing this to your mother at 6 years old. Heaven help you! What does that do to a little child?" "Well, it scared the hell out of me. I watched him dig a hole in the yard. He buried her under some rose bushes. He told me if I told anyone what I'd seen, I would be joining her under the roses. 'You mustn't tell anyone what Daddy did, or you will be sleeping with Mummy too.' So I learnt to keep my mouth shut. I tell you, those roses thrived. I gather it's the calcium in the bones that feeds the roses. I've never seen such flourishing roses before. Everyone asked my dad what his secret was. Little did they know a dead body, and voila, you have great roses," he joked. I didn't laugh at his attempt to be funny. "I can't believe he got away with murdering your mother. That's despicable." Well, he got away with it for the first year in a manner of speaking. But then people began to ask awkward questions. My mother had been away for far too long on an extended holiday, of which she had abandoned her own child, which was exceedingly out of character for her. It would appear that her own sister became very suspicious. The police investigated my father. They uncovered my mother's body under the roses, with the help of some cadaver dogs. Needless to say, my mother's sister didn't want to take care of me. Oh, no, that was too much for her. She was a lazy old cow. She couldn't be bothered with children. Never had any of her own. Didn't want to be saddled with me. Made that perfectly clear, of course. So I was put in foster care, which also screwed me up. Why do you think your father killed your mother? Did you ever ask him? He just told me the woman was a bloody bitch. Deserved everything that she got. And that's all you know? That's all I know. I was too young at the time to know what was going on. Even so, it must have really messed with your head. Did the authorities give you any counselling for the trauma you experienced? Well, I think I sat with a psychologist for a week. My memory's pretty vague on the matter. She made me draw pictures of my father and mother. I remember she cried when I drew my mother lying under a flower bed with a smiling face. She asked me why my mother was smiling, if she was under the ground. I said she was happy about the roses being so pretty above her head. I couldn't understand why the therapist was crying. I thought I'd drawn a very attractive picture. She kept saying, "You poor thing, you poor thing." I didn't feel very poor at all. Did you see your father again after he was incarcerated? No, he hung himself in a prison cell. Oh, I am sorry. Don't be. My father couldn't hack being on death row. If he was going to die, it would be on his own terms. That's the way he looked at it. I think he did the right thing, considering. It's no life being locked away in prison for anyone. I'd do the same if I was stuck in that place indefinitely. It's no life. The food is gross. Everything is watered down. What was the foster care system like? Not good. Not good at all. I went from one foster home to another. I was described as being a juvenile delinquent. Always getting into trouble, I was. I guess I was an angry kid, with an explosive temper. I'd break things, have tantrums, fight with other kids, steal things, especially money, from my foster mother's purse. Well, maybe you were angry about what happened with your mother on an unconscious level. You were fighting back. I don't mean to be rude, Carly, but I don't need a shrink. I'm just telling you my story. Sorry, I didn't mean to sound like I was feeling sorry for you. Do you mind if I smoke? I could go outside if you'd like. No, it's all right. You can smoke in here, but you must open the window. I watched as she pushed open my kitchen window, pulling out a box of cigarettes from his back pocket of his jeans, lighting one, and he began to smoke. I knew that once he told me his story, I wanted him out of here as fast as possible. I perceived that I was being reckless inviting him into my home, and realizing that his father had killed his mother, burying him under the roses, rarely left chills running down my spine. I had tried not to react or appear too shocked, but hearing him talk about his mother in the same tone of voice as the lemon detergent he'd been selling me made me wonder if he was a narcissist, devoid of any emotions at all. You had to be careful of people like him, I thought. So what happened to get you incarcerated? Well, I got involved in petty theft at first. I broke into homes, stole jewellery, sold it to pawn shops. Then I graduated to electrical gadgets and things like that. I got involved with drugs. That was a slippery slope, let me tell you. I became a dealer. I was an eyewitness to one of the drug dealers being shot at point-blank range for disobeying the boss. Of course, I was expected to witness this incident. It was a warning for me not to go screwing my dealer. We were arrested on a police raid. The rest is history. Let's just say I don't want to go back into prison in a hurry. It's not the kind of life I would recommend for anyone. Prison can be brutal. Well, thank you so much, Braden. You've really inspired me. I'm going to use some of the things that happened to you in my story. Not so fast, lady, said Braden, tensing up. I've told you my story, Carly. I think it would be nice if you offered me something to eat, don't you? It's close to lunchtime. Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry for being so rude. I'll rustle you up something quickly. Do you like spaghetti? That would be great, he said, watching me as I put the spaghetti into the boiling salted water. I felt nervous as I watched his eyes on me. I noticed his eyes looked predatory as he studied me, while the corners of his mouth lifted up into a provocative smile. "Why is it that you women love to complicate things?" he said as I dished up the pasta on his plate, which he began to eat hungrily. "This is very good, Carly. You're a sensational cook, if I may say so." "Thanks. What do you mean women like to complicate things?" "Exactly what I'm saying, Carly. You know the real reason you invited me inside. We're both adults, are we not? You can quit playing games with me. I know what this is all about. In my book, there's nothing wrong with women making the first advances. I'm a modern man. I accept that things have changed." "What are you talking about?" I protested. "I genuinely asked you into my home because I wanted your story. I'm suffering from writer's block. I have an editor breathing down my back like a dragon. I need to get a synopsis out to her on the next book as soon as possible." "You really think I believe that?" "I don't care whether you believe it or not. It's the truth. I'd really like you to go now. I'm very grateful for your story, Braden. I really am. But I do think you've outstayed your welcome." "I think we both know what's going on here, Carly. You felt it the moment you opened the door. Admit it. The attraction between us. The meeting of minds, so to speak, that I've been talking about. May I remind you, you were the one that came running after me to get me to come back with you. The story you wanted from me was just an excuse. I doubt if you're even a writer." I opened my purse and pulled out $100. "Please go," I said. "I will go now, but I think you and I have unfinished business, Carly. We both know it. Something happened between us, something beautiful that you're denying. But I've got patience. I can wait. I know how you women enjoy playing cat and mouse." I breathed a huge sigh of relief when the man picked up his cleaning products, pocketed my money, and then finally left. The thankful gratitude I felt was immeasurable now that the man had finally gone. But what had I done? He falsely believed I was interested in him, all because I wanted to know his story. What did he mean by having unfinished business with me? I couldn't understand that. I could hear the phone ringing off the hook. I dashed quickly to the entrance hall to answer it. Surprise, surprise, it was my next-door neighbour. I'd expected as much. I knew that every second I'd been entertaining that ex-con in my home, she'd been having kittens next door. The thought mildly amused me. Mrs. Clarkson was neurotic in every sense of the word. "What on earth is wrong with you, dear? I saw you inviting the young man into your home. You do realise he's an ex-con? I was worried sick. I nearly called the police. I mean, he could have been doing anything to you, absolutely anything." "I'll be fine, Mrs. Clarkson. He's gone." "I know those organic products are good, dear, but the whole idea of selling door to door is doing it on the doorstep. I don't want to speak out of turn, dear, but really, what did you think you were doing? I mean, the man could falsely get the wrong idea. He might think you were coming on to him. You don't want to be giving ex-cons the wrong idea. Who knows where it leads? It's terrifying, dear, what you did." "Thanks, Mrs. Clarkson, for your concern, but I'll speak to you later." I raced upstairs to my typewriter. I was absolutely amazed to find the words for me just flowed. I had the perfect storyline. I'd make an ex-con who had a troubled background and a murderer's father fall in love with a vicar's daughter. And the love story would ensure that despite the struggles of leaving behind his life of crime, he did so for the love of a woman, abandoning his former duplicitous lifestyle. As with all my romantic stories, the idea was for the couple to invariably live happily ever after. That made my readers very happy. The next morning I sent out the synopsis with the courier, and a while later I got a call from my editor. "I love it, love it, love it. It's absolutely fabulous. It is fantastic. I'm so impressed. This is going to be a winner. Well done. Get cracking with the story. I love it, love it, love it. It's got grit. It's got romance. It's got everything." It was the following evening after I'd gone to bed that I was awoken to the sense that someone was in my bedroom with me. It was the most chilling, alarming and frightening thing that I've ever experienced. It was an instinctive knowing that I wasn't alone. I woke up with a start to find Braden staring at me. He was just watching me sleep. It has got to be the creepiest thing that has ever happened to me. My heart thundered in my chest, my whole body quivered nervously. But I knew I had to remain calm and act nonchalant towards him, as if him being in my room was normal. If I overreacted, he might behave like his father had done with his mother, and slap me over the back of the head and bury me next to the apple tree. I needed to deal with the situation sensitively and get this man out of my house. "What are you doing here?" I trembled. "You frightened the life out of me. You scared me half to death." "Oh, I came through the kitchen window at the back. It was still open. You should never leave a window open like that. You're asking to be burgled. You never know who could enter your home. Luckily it was only me. Thought I'd pop around for a visit. You do look rather beautiful half asleep like this." "You can't just break into my house like this. You've got to go." "But you don't really want me to go, do you, Carly? You're just playing one of your hard-to-get games. We both know how you really feel about me, how you feel about us. You wouldn't have run after me if you didn't feel the way that I do." "Look, I'm tired. I would appreciate it if you'd go. I've had a really hard day today. I need my beauty sleep. I've got a thundering headache, if you must know." "Well, we can't have that. I'll go and get you some pills from the bathroom. I saw some in your cabinet." "That'll be very kind of you," I said. As he went into the bathroom to get me some tablets, I tiptoed into the kitchen cautiously, climbing out of the window, with the idea that I was going to run to the next-door neighbours and call the police. But lo and behold, he had entered the kitchen already, and saw me scrabbling out of the window. Now he was diving out of the window after me. So I thought the best place to hide would be the woodgrove, so I dashed towards the trees at the end of the yard that stretched back to a vast forest. "What the heck is your game, Carly? Come back now!" I didn't listen. I bolted through the woodgrove as fast as I could. I was terrified of what he might do to me. Maybe I was overreacting. I couldn't be sure. But I couldn't take any chances. I was afraid. It wasn't as dark as one would have expected, as the full moon offered a generous infusion of light through the open canopy of the trees. It enabled me to make out dense shapes and towering silhouettes of the Douglas firs and ponderosa pines, and to see the ground where my bare feet were treading on the earthen floor, over the occasional fern or flowering shrub. I didn't know where to run, left or right. Where should I hide? My heart was thundering in my ears, my legs were charged with adrenaline, but my mind was a complete whirl. I couldn't even think straight. I ran towards a large tree trunk and hid behind it, trying to stand very still. I could hear Braden calling me. "This is silly, Carly. I'm tired of your games. Let's be straight with each other. Quit messing each other around. You know you want me. I want you. Let's be adults about this, shall we?" I was very quiet. I didn't dare answer. All that I could hear was the soundless forest with a still breeze, which struck me as peculiar, as there were no crickets or frogs that I was usually accustomed to hearing at night. Braden's voice became angry. "I'm pissed," he said. "You're pissing me off, Carly. Come out of your hiding place now, or I'll wring your bloody neck. I'm sick and tired of your games. It's always the same with you girls, isn't it? One game after another. You came on to me, then you pull away. You're a bloody tease, and I've had enough, you bitch. You're lucky I'm just a reasonable fellow, but my patience is drying up very fast." I stayed incredibly still as he moved through the trees looking for me, his voice becoming angrier and angrier and angrier. "When I find you, Carly, I'll bloody kill you. That's what I'll do. I'll kill you." Everything was so airily quiet. I stared vacantly into the darkness, not moving a single muscle. All I could hear was the rapid pounding of my own heart, feel the cool breeze blowing against my skin, feel the rise and fall of my own breath. My eyes had adjusted to the darkness. I could see Braden looking for me. Then suddenly I heard heavy feet walking through the forest towards us. But these were not Braden's feet. This was someone else, but someone who walks with such a heavy footfall, as the forest seemed to pound under the weight of the stranger moving towards us. For a second Braden stood still, looking nervously towards the trees, almost as if he sensed someone was coming our way. But he didn't shrink away into the shadows, nor did he run. He stood his ground with the cocky arrogance he possessed, as if nothing in the world could possibly intimidate him. I could hear some branches snapping and cracking, and then a dark shadow moved through the trees, standing yards away from Braden. I could see the huge silhouette, a solid, hefty silhouette that stood up so tall and proud, giving off a menacing red eyeshine. As I observed this anomalous creature through the shadows of the moonlight that flickered through the trees, caressing the creature's features just enough for me to discern that he was a humanoid-looking creature with the face of a man, the body of a giant, covered in long flowing hair, that I now know to be a Bigfoot. The creature growled, lifting back its lips to reveal its huge white human-like teeth. A deep, low guttural growl emanated from the back of its throat. The whole forest shook under the vibration of this sound. I could see it staring directly at Braden. The man seemed so confident, had now become a gibbering wreck. I could see his eyes grow round with horror, his body stiffen with dread. I think he did want to run away, but he seemed to become like a stone statue. It was as if fear had frozen him, incapacitating his ability to move. The critter growled again, and began beating his chest with his powerful fists in a display of dominance. Then it roared. There are no words to describe that aggressive roar. It was as if the forest reacted to that sound, for the ground vibrated. The boughs of the ponderosa pines began to vigorously move. For me it was like an outer-body experience, as if I was disconnected to my own body, viewing the scene unfolding before me like a television program. I felt no fear, no horror, no nothing. I felt as if I was caught up in a dream, of which I would surely wake. It felt surreal, so surreal that I doubted what I was seeing for a moment was the truth. I think in my astonishment I had suppressed any immediate reaction. When the creature roared a second time, it seemed to jolt Braden out of his frozen stupor. Then he let out an agonizing scream. He ran as fast as he could through the forest, with this thing dashing behind him. The creature moved so gracefully, so fast, and then they were both gone from my sight. I was certain that Braden was dead. I'd sensed the wrath of this angry critter. Nothing could escape a critter of such might, power, strength, and stamina. Surely nothing. I could hear a distant scream. It was clearly Braden. This time it was my turn to react. It dawned on me the precariousness of my situation, the danger I was clearly in. Whatever this creature was, it would be back. Then it would be after me, I was sure. I quickly made my way towards the furthest side of the forest, where I managed to make my way to a friend's backyard. The relief I felt was absolutely immense. I ran to their front door, beginning to bang it as hard as I could. But when my neighbour opened the door to me, I collapsed in their entrance hall from the shock. I was unable to say a single word, so they took me into their kitchen and gave me a tot of whiskey. In the meantime, the police were called to my property, suspecting a break-in there. They found Braden on the ground, slightly concussed from a blow to the head, but no worse for wear. They said that all he could babble on about was a monster in the woods, claiming that a strange creature had flung a rock at him, which had hit him in the head, causing him to fall. He'd slipped into unconsciousness for a while. When the paramedics were leaning over him, he was scratching, screaming, and fighting back with all his life, as he believed the paramedics were the monster back again. But their reassuring voices seemed to calm him down. I do think he got off lightly. I was certain the creature was going to kill him. The fact that it had only thrown a rock at him possibly meant he only wanted to scare him off. That's what I believe, anyway. When I recovered from my shocked response, I reported Braden to the police, informing them that he had climbed through my window, had stood over my bed. This revelation alarmed them greatly. They believed he was mentally unstable, as there had been numerous restraining orders filed against him in the past by various women, claiming that he had been obsessed with them. So he was taken into custody after spending time recuperating in hospital, and then transferred to a mental facility. I told the police what Braden told me about his childhood. It turns out his story is absolutely true. His father had buried his mother under the roses. No wonder the man is so unstable, the police officer said to me. Imagine witnessing such a harrowing event at such a young age. It's likely to mess you up. I never mentioned anything about the hairy creature I'd seen that night. I knew no one would believe such nonsensical claims. I could tell Braden's reports about the beast we'd encountered had seriously got the police to question his sanity all the more. In the interview, the policeman actually said to me, "Was Braden on drugs when he broke into your house?" Has he been making up these crazy stories about a monster trying to kill him in the woodgrove? I'm glad to say that I moved away from Seattle to another state, in the hope that Braden would never find me again. I don't know what happened to him, and why that creature never killed him, but I do know this: it was the most terrifying beast I've ever seen in my entire life, that I now assume was a territorial Bigfoot. Some good that came out of this extraordinary event. I found my ability to write a gripping story came much more easily to me, because I'd experienced one myself. So there you are. That's my story.
Dear Sarah and all your lovely listeners, my name is Mason and I've been a long-haul truck driver for many long years now. So as you can imagine, I've got some incredibly exciting tales to share with you and your listeners that might just make the hair on your head curl, including a very exciting one-on-one encounter that I actually had with the hairy man himself, a way you would never imagine was actually possible. The ironic thing about life is it does have a peculiarly funny way of surprising you and always keeping you on your toes. I say that because growing up in San Francisco in an apartment in Nob Hill, it was really challenging spending many lonely nights without my papa. I remember as young boys my papa would be working for weeks at a time on the open road as a truck driver, delivering freight from San Francisco to Las Vegas. My brother Liam and I witnessed firsthand the stoic isolation and solitariness of my mother's empty, reclusive life that she tried so desperately hard to conceal from us with no avail. We knew that she really missed our papa. I remember my brother and I made a solemn promise to each other as young boys growing up that one day when we got married ourselves, we would never ever become truck drivers. Never, never, never was the operative word, because we did not want our wives to experience the segregation and loneliness that we had personally witnessed at close hand in my mother's secluded and fractured life. Growing up as kids in the 80s, my brother and I had an incredible, vibrant, spirited and colourful life in San Francisco. At that time, rents were still incredibly low, and I think the cost of our 3-bedroom rental was about $550 a month, which at the time we actually thought was rather expensive. In those days, even artists and musicians could actually afford to live in San Francisco, and they would support their carefree, laid-back bohemian lifestyles in the warehouses of Soma and the Victorians of Mission District. This would not invariably be possible today, because San Francisco has become ludicrously expensive these days. I also remember the skyrocketing cases of the whole anomaly of AIDS, which came into focus in the 80s. And also there was the terrible 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake that caused a tragic loss of life in the Bay Area, and my mother lost her younger sister Beryl to the 6.9 quake, which she took years to overcome because her sister was her very best friend. I remember as kids we would race down the San Francisco streets on the back of our bikes and our banana seats. It was in the Reagan era and everyone was wearing sweatshirts with the Esprit logos, and it was much more carefree way of life then, as we didn't have the technology we do today. So we were not physically attached to our cell phones and tablets like they invariably are today. Growing up, my brother and I were transfixed by everything mechanical, as we loved the inner workings of a car. I truly thought we'd end up becoming car mechanics, but it seems I was incredibly wrong. The universe clearly had other ideas in mind for us. When I was about 15 years old, my papa took me on a long-haul truck trip just for the fun of it, and I was totally blown away by my papa's job, and I tried to overcome this rising, bubbling passion and enthusiasm within me, but it could not be suppressed. And when my papa gave me a go at the wheel, well, I was now well and truly hooked and definitely smitten with the idea of becoming a trucker. Worse still, the following week, Liam joined my father on an open road trip on his truck, and he was also completely bedazzled by the truck driving phenomenon, and we were seemingly enticed by its attractive allure, and nothing could stop us. I began to realise truck driving was in my genetic makeup, because I just loved every aspect of driving a truck. My father inevitably did his best to try and discourage us from following in his footsteps, and warned us fervently about the damaging effects being a truck driver could impose on our marriages. But it would seem that my brother and I could not be discouraged. We couldn't be dissuaded or even disheartened by my father's persuasive warnings. Of course, he was absolutely right, because many years later, after Liam and I began trucking, my father's ominous predictions about our marriages sadly came to pass. We can both testify to the ugly demises of 2 of our marriages, as we now have 2 divorces each behind our belts, which is a pretty hectic and heavy price to pay. I also have 2 boys from my second marriage that are both now in their late teens, that are showing a very keen interest in following in my footsteps, and try as I might, I am having huge difficulty in thwarting their eager enthusiasm and intrigue about trucks, much to my ex-wife's absolute infuriation. She keeps telling me to tell them that trucking is absolutely awful and that I hate every aspect of it, but that's going way too far, because I'm not going to lie to my kids. How can I pretend to despise something that I clearly love and adore? That would be blatantly dishonest and deceptive. My attitude is that I cannot stop my kids from following their passions in life, as that would be grossly unfair. A lot of people ask me what it is about trucking that I love so very much, and I think I enjoy the quality of personal time I have on the open road, and I do spend a great deal of time driving through some of America's most exquisite scenery while listening to my nostalgic, upbeat 80s music that I have never wearied of. The more modern stuff, especially that hideous rap, is something I just do not appreciate and have a very hard time understanding why anybody enjoys that kind of stuff. It invariably can get lonely on the open road, driving over long distances, so if driving a truck is not in your blood, it's unlikely to work for you. I've seen many truck drivers throw in the trowel in defeated despair because they could not hack the long solitary hours of driving on your own. In some cases, people share the drive load with a partner, and that seems to work out better for some who cannot bear the solitude and isolation that truck driving invariably brings. Anyway, on with my stories. On one occasion I was driving my truck in the early evening, and it was literally bucketing down with rain, and it was coming down in cats and dogs, making the road precariously difficult to navigate, and seeing through my windscreen was becoming onerously difficult. I could hear the ominous roll of thunder in the distance, and I knew that this was going to be one heck of a storm. I had a small quota of time to meet my delivery windows in, so I was ultimately going to do my level best to drive through this inauspicious-looking storm, as awful as that was. I knew driving like this was rather reckless, treacherous and dangerous, but quite frankly I didn't have much of a choice. It was getting dim, and I could see the bright yellow, jagged electric light of the lightning piercing through the sky, and the atmospheric electricity on this evening seemed heightened in its intensity. I was driving extra slowly on this occasion through a very built-up small town full of ice cream parlours, boutiques, delis, shops, diners, coffee shops and restaurants. Most of these were closed, obviously, apart from the restaurants, of course. I noticed 2 people actually huddled under a large oak tree trying to block out the rain and waiting to cross the road as the traffic light was still red. I stopped my truck immediately and signalled for the 2 people to cross by flashing my lights. I wanted these 2 poor drenched people to cross the other side of the road, where they would invariably reach shelter under the cover of the shopping arcade. They were completely soaked to the skin, with no raincoat or umbrella between the 2 of them. In that precise moment, the huge oak tree they were sheltering under was suddenly struck by lightning. The explosive sound was so deafening and way too close for comfort. I have never seen something so alarming and so apocalyptic in all my life before. I observed this lightning literally blow these 2 people off their feet and thrust them into the air like rag dolls, and it almost looked like they were exploding like fireworks. It was quite frankly horrifying to observe, and I was terrified. I immediately wasted no time in jumping out of my vehicle and dashing precariously towards the 2 bodies lying on the ground, with their clothes lying in shreds and tatters around them. I was almost certain I was going to observe 2 deceased bodies. The teenage boy had completely lost his shorts. They had literally been blown off his body in the explosion and were filled with huge holes. It was bucketing down with rain, and the motionless bodies seemed dead, as I would have expected under the circumstances. But I immediately tried CPR, and I started to shake their bedraggled bodies, and after a while they seemed to become revived and come out of their coma. They did not appear to remember anything that had happened to them after they were actually struck by lightning, but through the colossal gaping holes with their jagged burnt edges of their clothes, I could invariably see that they were very badly burnt indeed. I called emergency services at once and helped the man and his teenage son out of the rain by escorting them back to my truck. While we waited for the emergency services to arrive, I remember father and son were so stunned that they literally sat there like zombies, staring out into space for a very long time and not saying a word. I mean, who could blame them? I think their close shave with death had really knocked their socks off, possibly physically, mentally, and very definitely emotionally. I was to examine the burns on their bodies, and I promise you they were third-degree burns with large red rings on their backs that looked like scalding from a boiling kettle. I was surprised that they weren't in pain, but I gather after the shock wore off they did experience a great deal of agonizing discomfort. The emergency services were utterly amazed that they hadn't been killed instantly, given the state of their injuries. But I'm glad to say father and son did both survive these ghastly, grievous injuries and received intensive treatment for their burns, and I gather they made a full and remarkable recovery. Now, being a truck driver, you do invariably get to observe some strange characters on the road, but never more so than on a late winter's evening in Tennessee. I was driving down the road to the scene of a horrifying collision. It appeared to be that one car had smashed quite badly into the back of a small, very cheap-looking utility vehicle, and so I got out of my freight truck to see if I could help at all. There was a young woman looking very shell-shocked because the front of her car had taken a very bad hit, and it would seem was completely smashed in, the engine through the dashboard, so to speak. Frankly, I was amazed that she could have caused so much damage to the front of her car, unless, of course, she'd been speeding, which I suspected was invariably the case. I did detect a somewhat sheepish glazed look on her face, which quite frankly affirmed what I'd previously suspected. I could see a man in his 30s who appeared to be climbing to the back of his vehicle via the front seat area, almost as if he was trying to retrieve something from the boot area of his car. His boot was completely mangled and could not be accessed through the back door. The woman was trying to dial emergency services on her phone with her shaking fingers and having very little luck, when quite suddenly the man brought out of his car a long dangling human leg, which he placed on the side of the road, with a very dispassionate look on his face, almost as if he was retrieving an old smelly carpet from the back of his car. I'm afraid the leg came off my mother's body in the accident. Still, it can't be helped. And he said this in such a nonchalant way, as if he was discussing a weather report, and there was nothing wrong about bringing out a dismembered body part out of his vehicle. I was so horrified that I just stared blankly at this man like a mummified corpse, hardly daring to believe what I was actually witnessing. Could this really be happening before my eyes, I wondered, while the woman began to scream, "Oh my God! Oh my God, I've just killed his mother! Oh my God!" She burst into floods of inconsolable tears. The slender hillbilly returned to the vehicle and proceeded to drag out his mother's deceased body with its dangling loose hand and dragged it along the road like it was a sack of potatoes. If things couldn't have got any more bizarre, stranger or peculiar, they invariably did. He then brought out another deceased body and put it beside the body of his mother. It looked like a young female, and she was also deceased. I was so bowled over with amazement that they had actually both died in this accident, and that this hillbilly was acting in such a detached, indifferent manner about their sudden and tragic demise. This time the woman started to scream, "Oh my God! I've killed 2 people!" she said, freaking out. "I'm definitely going down for this. I better call my lawyer." I could see her tapping as fast as she could into her cell phone, and luckily it would seem her fingers were now more composed. "Dad!" she cried. "I've just killed a mother and a daughter." Her phone was on speaker, and I could hear her father say, "You've done what?" And I could hear a woman's voice say, "What has Nicolette done now? Do not tell me she's been speeding again. I warned her about this." "Dad, I've killed 2 people. I need a lawyer, now." "You've got to be kidding," came her father's voice. "What the hell happened?" "I drove into the back of this man's utility vehicle, and I killed 2 women instantly. And her leg is lying separated from her body on the road. Dad, if I'm going to go down for this and spend my life in jail, Everyone's going to call me a murderer. All my friends, everybody, they're all going to accuse me of murder. Now, hush, came the father's voice. Where are you? I'm coming now, and I'll get a lawyer onto the case now. Do you understand? Nothing to worry about, dear. The 30-year-old yokel looked at the woman and said, Why are you crying? You've got insurance, right, for the car, right? I'm crying because I've just killed 2 women. I can't believe you're acting so indifferent when your mother and your sister, I assume, have both been killed in this tragic accident, and you're acting like nothing has happened. Well, I didn't care for them much anyway, said the man. Never did like my mother. She was always such a busybody, poking her nose in everybody's business. And as for my sister, she was a spoilt brat. I'll be damned if I pay any funeral costs for the 2 of them. Do you have any idea how expensive a coffin is these days? Oh, and the cost of a funeral, it's crazy. What did those miserable cows ever do for me? I'll be damned if I fork out a single penny for them. You know, you really are cruel, said the woman. You don't care that your own mother and sister have just died. All you care about is money. And as for me, I'm going down for murder for this, I'll have you know. And how do you think that makes me feel? The man began to laugh. You think you killed my mum and sister? I found them a couple of hours ago in the house because they both died of carbon monoxide poisoning because of that broken-down old water heater. I kept warning the old lady about the poison gases, but she was too tight to get it fixed. Serves her right, if you ask me. You mean I didn't kill them? Cried the woman, looking agog. You mean they were already dead? You've got to be kidding me. Suddenly I realised that this was all incredibly bizarre. What on earth are you doing with these bodies loose in your car like this anyway? Should you not have called the authorities and got a funeral home involved to remove their corpses from your home in the first place? And what about certifying and formalising their deaths? They might need a post-mortem as well to verify the cause of death. It might not be carbon monoxide poisoning that killed them. That needs to be investigated. It's very illegal, I think, to handle the body yourself like this. I told you, said the man. I want to avoid funeral costs. Why should I inject a penny of my hard-earned money for my sister and mother? Are you kidding me? I'm not going to do that. And I tell you, I can't stand paperwork of any kind. I need to dump them off at the body farm because they accept donations. That's why I came out at night. Do you think you could take me in your truck to dump them off? I don't want anyone to see me. My car's a complete write-off. It'll take me just a second to load them in your truck, and I'll be quick, I promise. They should not be any trouble at all. I mean, they are dead. Most certainly not, I snapped. I want nothing to do with this mess you've got yourself into. You'll have to tell the authorities yourself what you've actually done. This is not my problem, and I refuse to get involved. I haven't done anything wrong, snapped the man. I'm just trying to save a bit of money. What's wrong with that? What's a body farm? Asked the young woman, who'd become more composed and appeared to be somewhat intrigued. I've never heard of such a place. The man pulled out a piece of paper from his pockets. It's at the University of Tennessee Anthropological Research Facility, a few miles from downtown Alco Highway. It's for the study of body decomposition in various settings, and they do accept body donations. You cannot donate your family's body to the body farm, I told the man. I imagine there needs to be a specific clause in their will that stipulates they want their body to be donated to the body farm for research purposes. You can't just dump them off willy-nilly like that. Are you kidding? I thought if I threw them over the fence, that would all be fine, said the man. I'm sure they're grateful for all the donations they can get. And what about anonymous donations? Aren't they an added perk? Even the young woman began to look at the man in absolute horror. Are you for real? She gasped. I can't believe you actually just said that. Do you know nothing about the law in North America? You can't randomly throw dead bodies over fences just because you want to save a bob or two. Suddenly we saw a man and a woman rushing towards the young woman with frantic looks on their faces. Oh, sweetheart, said the father. I've got the lawyer on the phone. He's going to sort this wretched, grim business out for you, I promise. Now remember, you were not driving fast, and it was an accident. Can you remember that? You weren't driving fast, and it was an accident." The girl smiled jubilantly at her father and gave him the hugest hug. "Dad, I didn't kill them," she said happily. "Isn't it amazing? I didn't kill them. They were already dead in the car. He was just going to dump them off and throw them over the fence at the university when I happened to drive in the back of the vehicle. Isn't that fantastic, Dad?" The father and mother stared at the man with horrified looks on their faces, as if they were looking into the very eyes of the Grim Reaper, and I could tell by their terrified expressions that they were definitely in flight mode. Before I knew it, they were escorting their daughter back to their cars and running as fast as they possibly could, with a young girl protesting indignantly, "But, Mum, I need to wait for the police. What's all the rush? I have to file a report." I realised with all these shenanigans going on that none of us had actually got round to calling emergency services, and so I quickly dialed 911, and within minutes we were surrounded by ambulance sirens and flashing police cars, and the hillbilly was being bustled away in the back of a police car in handcuffs, protesting his innocence. "I didn't kill them," he kept saying over and over again. "I was just dumping them off at the body farm. What's wrong with saving a bit of money? Doesn't anybody understand that?" I was to find out later that that hillbilly was in fact telling the whole truth, and his mother and sister were actually killed by carbon monoxide poisoning due to a water heater, and he was trying to dispose of the bodies in order to save on funeral costs. It really is a funny old world out there, and some of the stuff is so ludicrous you literally cannot make the stuff up. It's off the charts, totally crazy, which makes the world of fiction almost seem dull by contrast. Another time I was out on the roads. It was late evening during the week, and as I was driving I became desperate to relieve myself, and as it was a rather remote area, I was luckily able to pull my truck to the side of the road and finally park. I know of truck drivers who wear adult nappies because they don't want to take the time to stop, and there are invariably people who will pee in their bottles, but I prefer to do it the most civilised old-fashioned way possible, by going behind a tree. Armed with a headlamp, I climbed over the guardrail, scurried down the grassy embankment, and wasted no time to find a large oak tree to relieve myself behind. And as I began to pee, I realised I was relieving myself on a pile of matted hair and green moss. I wondered to myself what on earth it was. It looked like a piece of discarded old carpet. Just as I was wondering what the strange hair-like thing was, it suddenly began to move. I saw two horrified yellow eyes suddenly opening through this bundle of grey thick carpet. It appeared that I was peeing on top of a living creature. I could hardly believe it. The critter must have been sleeping under the large tree and was awoken to me spraying it with urine, and it was not too pleased by the experience. I'll never forget the expression on the creature's face, because it looked so startled, surprised, bemused, and very shocked. The creature rose from the ground and locked eyes with me for a very long moment. I realised almost at once that she was female because she had furry breasts. I knew at once it was a Bigfoot because I've heard other truckers talk about the critter before, but never in all my born days did I ever think that I would have an encounter like this, and certainly not in these circumstances. I mean, I never imagined that I'd ever go peeing on a Bigfoot. I think the thing that horrified me the most about the encounter was just how colossal and huge this creature was. You hear about it from people who claim to have seen Bigfoot. Oh, he was so huge. But when you actually see him in real life, it's a huge shock. I'd say she was 700 pounds, 8 feet tall and 3 feet wide, with a very distinctive bullet-shaped head, massive, massive shoulders, and arms that were so long that she could have quite literally touched her ankles without bending over. The creature was covered in this long matted shaggy hair that really looked like a huge shaggy carpet, that could have done with a very good brush. I noticed Spanish moss was also growing in her hair, which was exceedingly odd, I thought. The creature had a very gentle-looking angular face and a flat nose and a slender mouth, and very deep-set, kindly golden eyes. I looked at the critter sheepishly because I did feel very embarrassed, especially when I was looking at the wet spot that I'd actually created on a small part of her torso, which she wiped down and actually smelt with her hands. That also was humiliating, because I'm quite sure it didn't smell great. I could tell she wasn't at all impressed, but she was much more upset to have actually been discovered and located by me, than the actual act of peeing on her. I think these Bigfoots are very evasive and elusive, and they don't like to be discovered by humans. If they're going to do any encountering, I'm sure it's really on their terms and not on ours. The creature got up and glided away into the woods with 5-foot strides, swinging her long arms backwards and forwards with such synchronicity. She was so agile, majestic and lofty, and she was beautiful to watch. I don't think I've ever seen anything move so fast and with so much grace. I also never sensed any animosity from her whatsoever, and I should have been terribly afraid, but I guess my shock was literally hijacked my fear. Even so, if you look at how imposing and majestic and powerful and strong she was, I should have been terrified. But I think it was her gentle demeanour that literally calmed me down. On reflection, I'm very glad I didn't pee on a male Bigfoot, because my trucker friend assured me that if I had done that, things might have taken a very different turn, because it would have appeared that I was acting very dominantly, and things could have turned very badly for me in those circumstances. And I have a sneaky feeling that he might be right, because I don't think a male Bigfoot wants to be challenged by a male human. Did I not tell you that the life of a trucker is a very interesting life indeed? Now you know why I like my job. So that's my story. Dear Sarah and all your lovely listeners, my name is Evangeline, and I grew up in Chicago, which is now a booming, dynamic, vibrant, multidimensional metropolis, which is pretty extraordinary because its early humble trade post roots were probably ill-prepared for Chicago to develop into such an imposing, impressive city, which it invariably is today. Many people wonder why one would ever choose to live in a city where 9 months of the year you have to put up with icy conditions and tons of snow, and may invariably spend much of that time hibernating indoors. I think my family rarely enjoys the Midwestern heritage here, along with the exquisite sandy beaches, excellent places to eat, from Mexican, Asian and Indian foods, and the colourful, diverse culture that we have here. We may have cold winters indeed, but we also have the most exquisite 90 days of summer that you could ever envisage or imagine, with lots of barbecues and al fresco dining. Being islanders, we all tend to gravitate towards water, and one of my all-time favourite places to frequent is Lake Michigan, and I literally love going cycling or taking our 2 French bulldogs for walks there. Another great thing about Chicago is that we do have an excellent way to navigate the transport system, from our trains to our buses, and we also have the most amazing museums, parks and festivals, which make living here all the more exciting and very interesting. So I think Chicago is a phenomenal place to live. I've spent my entire life living in this very pretty residential neighbourhood called Bucktown, Illinois, which is located close to excellent shopping, restaurants and plenty of nightlife. I do live in a double-storey contemporary-style red brick home on a very quaint little suburban street with its pretty treed pavements and individualistic-styled homes built in close proximity together, which gives our street incredible charm and character. I live in my home with my mother and father and my 2 older sisters, Beatrix and Victoria. My strange Bigfoot story rarely begins when something quite extraordinary began to happen to me. It would seem that when I was 15 years old, I began to experience the most extraordinary panic attacks, which includes the violent heartbeats and the disorientated blurry vision that made me feel that I was literally about to die. The first time that I had this bizarre experience, I remember I was standing in the clothes department in a large department store in downtown Chicago. Suddenly I began to feel my heart racing through my chest at 1,000 miles an hour. My breathing became shallow and very fast, while my body heat soared to such an extent that I was almost drenched in sweat, and my vision became incredibly blurred. I began to fear that I would drop down dead in a second in this department store. And I promise you, the idea of drawing this much attention to myself from the passing strangers in the shop made me sick to my stomach. I was actually more concerned about that than dying, which is exceedingly bizarre, but that's me for you. I remember reaching out for a chair and holding on to it for dear life with my hands, squeezing the wood as hard as I could. And then I just bolted out of that door, running out of the store as fast as I could towards the parking lot, where I dived into the seat of the nearest taxicab that I could find and begged the driver to take me home as quickly as he possibly could. When I returned home, I became very calm, and my former frantic, outrageous, fearful behaviour simply receded and retracted, making me feel so daft and incredibly silly. Why on earth had I been so anxious and behaved so bizarrely, I wondered in horror. This sort of thing had never happened to me before. After this very peculiar event, the anxiety-induced phenomena would invariably rise up unannounced, like a horrifying serpent ready to strike its victim down, and would occur to me in numerous places on a regular basis, and it was beginning to ruin my life. I would be shopping in the supermarket for my parents, and in the middle of a transaction, I would have to bolt out of the store and run towards a taxicab, flagging it down, leaving behind all my groceries in the cart, and the shoppers queuing behind me saying, "What the hell happened there?" I've also been in hair salons in the process of having my hair washed, and in petrified terror, I've hightailed it out of the salon with my hair full of soapy suds, leaving onlookers looking very perturbed. Worst of all, I've even run out of the dentist's room in the middle of a procedure, I kid you not. Before long, this crippling, embarrassing and harrowing fear just literally saturated my life like a looming black thundercloud that unfortuitously hung over my life like a baleful boomerang that could strike me down at any time, whenever. Whatever was happening to me, it was literally sucking and sapping the life out of me like a leech. Before long, I was almost completely housebound because I was so petrified of having a panic attack again. It was like the fear of actually having a panic attack was almost as debilitating and disturbing as the panic attack itself. It was a vicious cycle for me that could happen almost anywhere and everywhere, and it would always creep up on me unannounced in such a stealthy way, like a cheetah emerging from the dark shadows. One thing I know is that every time this transpired, I would feel absolutely certain that I was going to die, and these irrational phobias confiscated all my common sense, and I ultimately believed the very worst about my physical predicament. I remember the worst places for these attacks were where white shopping malls were, with never-ending areas of white-tiled floors and bright lights used to enhance the attractiveness of stores. It always seemed to set me off in a full-blown attack, so I hated those places. My parents became grievously concerned about my mental health and the destabilizing and dismantling effects that these attacks were having on my young teenage life. I was being robbed of interacting with my friends, going to school, and any other extracurricular activities like parties and exciting outdoor events. In truth, I had become like a prisoner trapped in my own home. It would seem that at home, or in our family car, or even a stranger's taxicab, I always felt very safe and secure. But out there in the big wide world, I felt incredibly vulnerable, assailable, insecure, and terribly afraid. Soon my parents were escorting me to multiple doctors and psychologists, and I had no end of blood tests and all kinds of mental health evaluations, and everything came back normal. I was presented with a clean bill of physical and mental health, although the psychologist did ascertain that I was displaying many symptoms of post-traumatic disorder, which my parents thought was utterly ridiculous. This was because my parents believed emphatically that I'd never been exposed to any kind of emotional trauma in my entire life. One of the doctors had prescribed anti-anxiety medications for me that had worked significantly well in reducing my high stress and anxiety levels, enabling my life to become much more manageable. But sadly, the attacks never faded completely, nor did they completely subside. I was living a precariously uncertain life, always looking over my shoulder, wondering if that hostile, unfortuitous boomerang would strike me down again. One day my mother was having a book club meeting at our home, and the women were all discussing the book that they had been reading. It just so happened that one of the characters in the book was a very nice gentleman whom had sadly been involved in the Vietnam War, and was exposed to so much grievous death and violence and killing that the after effects devastated him so much that he began to experience the disabling effects of post-traumatic stress disorder. It would seem the woman began to discuss the implications of this disorder when my mother started sharing with her friends my huge struggle with anxiety and panic, so that they began to discuss the subject among themselves. "I took my Evangeline to the psychologist," my mother told them. "He told me that my daughter was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder." "I mean, how ridiculous is that? Evangeline has never been exposed to trauma a day in her life," she remarked. There's no way her anxiety can be related to that. How do you know that for sure? Asked Lily, one of the ladies. I was abused by my uncle when I was young, and no one in my family ever knew about it for many long years. My mother looked shocked. You think an adult has abused Evangeline? Asked my mother in absolute horror. Anything is possible, said Lily. Or she could have a repressed memory of a traumatic event that she cannot even remember. That's also conceivable. It happens quite often, and young children are renowned for suppressing traumatic events and memories. I know that for a fact. You are kidding, said my mother. You think Evangeline could be suppressing a painful memory of some kind? It's highly possible. You know, you should send your daughter to a regression therapist, suggested Sue, another one of the ladies at the book club. That's what I would do if I was in your shoes. They can work wonders, you know. I've heard they have the ability to take you back to the traumatic event so that you know what the root cause of the trauma actually is. Apparently, when you get to the root of your problem, that's the only time that you can actually heal. You have to face the problem head on. You have to know what it actually is. So there we were, fast forward a week, and I was sitting in a therapist's white swanky leather recliner in a very debonair, state-of-the-art looking office that was painted in a very pretty pale green colour, was calming and relaxing, and smelt prettily of lemongrass. The therapist entered the room smiling. I noticed that she was a very congenial middle-aged woman who possessed a very kind and gentle demeanour that I warmed to almost immediately. I felt I could trust her, which I think was significant for someone with my issues. "Hello, Evangeline," she said. "Your mother tells me that you have been experiencing big issues with anxiety that causes you a great deal of stress. Is that right?" "Yes," I said. "I used to be so confident, carefree and happy, but now I'm always afraid of having a panic attack." "What are you really afraid of, Evangeline?" she asked me. "The trouble is I really don't know, but when I have an attack, I always think I'm going to die." "Well, that's very common with a panic attack," the therapist assured me. "It happens to the best of us. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do in this session is to go back to the source of that anxiety, because even though you ultimately do not remember or even know what caused you this fear in the first place, your higher self knows everything about you, and I'm going to connect with that part of your subconscious mind to ask it to take me back to the source of that fear so we can establish what has caused you so much trauma in the first place. It's much like pulling out a weed in your backyard. If you just pull out the leaves without removing the root, that weed grows back and the problem resurfaces and sometimes becomes stronger and even more aggressive. If you pull the weed out by the roots, then it doesn't grow back. In this session, I'm aiming to find the root so that ultimately we can pull it out in one go. So what I'm going to do during our session is I'm going to ask you to relax, and as we count down, I'm going to transport you back into time as if we are in a time machine, and your higher self will answer my questions. Do you understand? "I think so," I nodded. "Good, so let's get started." Before long, I was lying back in this recliner, and the therapist was beginning to relax me as she kept counting down and down and down, and finally she began to ask me all kinds of questions. "Evangeline, I want you to go back to the first time you became afraid. What year is it?" "It's July the 13th, 2005. "How old do you think you are?" "I think I'm 7 years old. Yes, I'm 7. "What are you wearing?" "I'm wearing a pale green dress with white shoes." "Where are you?" "I'm with my parents and both of my sisters in a forest." "What are you doing in the forest, Evangeline?" "Well, we're camping there. My father is actually barbecuing on the fire pit, and he's making us burgers. I'm feeling very hungry." "What are you doing now?" "I'm playing with my sisters in the woods, but my mother told us we must stay close to the campsite. She doesn't want us to wander off. She's very afraid of us getting lost and losing our way." "What are you playing? Can you see what you're playing?" "I think it's hide and seek. Yes, that's right. It's hide and seek. Now, Evangeline, I want you to focus on the area where you first feel that fear. Where are you now?" "I'm hiding from my sisters behind this very big tree. I think it's an oak." Something is tapping, or someone is tapping me on the shoulders. I think that Beatrix has already discovered me, and I feel very disappointed and rather cross because I thought I had found a really good hiding spot. I finally turn my head to acknowledge Beatrix, but it's not Beatrix that has touched me. I'm so startled because I can't believe what I'm seeing. I've never seen anything like this before. Who is touching you, Evangeline? Describe the person to me. Oh, no, it's not a person. It's a huge, hairy giant. It's very, very big and very scary to look at. I've never seen anything so colossal before. This thing is larger and stronger than a grizzly bear, and it's standing up on 2 feet like a human. It's a very thick creature with lots and lots of muscles, and it's got breasts too. It must be female. It's staring at me with these big brown eyes. What are you scared of, Evangeline? Why are you scared of this creature? Because it's big and it's frightening. I'm thinking that it might want to eat me or to hurt me or harm me. I'm not sure what it wants. Why would you think that, Evangeline? Because the creature is intimidating. It's powerful, like a lion or tiger. It's very frightening. Now I want you to engage with the creature's psyche for a moment. I want you to perceive yourself through the creature's eyes. Try and read her energy and see what you get from her. See what she really wants with you, and see if you can tap into her emotions and feelings. You can do it. Try. I sense she doesn't want to hurt me at all. I'm surprised by that. I think she's very sad and lonely, even though she does have friends, but she doesn't have any children of her own. I think she's recently had a stillbirth. She's emotionally fragile and very overwrought. She was broken up by the death of her youngling and has not come to terms with it. It's eating her up in shreds inside her. She feels so desperate and hopeless, like she's really lost in life. How does that make you feel, knowing that about this creature, I mean? I feel very, very sad for her. It makes me want to cry because I can sense her desperate, debilitating pain, almost as if it was my own. I can feel it. I think she feels so lost and alone, as if her life has somehow lost its purpose and meaning, and even value. So what does this creature want with you then, Evangeline? I think she wants to take me to her home with her. She wants to find a substitute for her youngling that she lost so tragically. I think she wants to raise me as her own child. She so desires and longs to be a mother again, more than anything else in this entire world. She feels that it's what she's meant to do, that it's her life's purpose, and that's what she's here for in the first place. That's all she desires. Well done, Evangeline. Well done. You're doing incredibly well. I'm so proud of you. Now I want you to tell me what is happening next. What is she doing? Is she standing there? Is she moving? Is she looking at you? What's she doing now? Well, she's picking me up and carrying me over her shoulders, and she wants to take me back to her home. Why are you not screaming, Evangeline? Why aren't you letting your parents know that you're being abducted by this creature? I'm too scared to scream, because I think the creature could hurt me if I screamed. You know from the creature's energy that she would never hurt you, right? I know that now, but the little me doesn't know that. The little me is feeling very, very afraid. Of course you are. Now tell me, what's happening next? The creature's running with me on her back. She's moving very fast. She's very swift. I can hear her breathing. She sounds like a horse when they breathe. I feel that she wants to run as fast as she possibly can, and she's very, very fast. Now I want you to tap into her energy again, Evangeline. What is she feeling now? I sense she knows she shouldn't be abducting me. She knows it's very wrong. But her longing for a child is so unbearably strong that it's driving her and propelling her to take me with her. She wants a child that badly. What happens next, Evangeline? I can hear my mother screaming my name. She sounds frantic and desperate and terrified. I think she's looking for me and she can't find me. The creature stops dead in her tracks because she hears my mother's desperate calls. Tell me, Evangeline, How is the creature feeling now when she hears your mother crying out like that in terror? I sense she feels absolutely terrible because she knows the pain of losing a child herself. I think she realizes that she cannot take me from my mother. She understands that she would inflict too much pain on her, and she can't do it to someone else. So she's deciding to return me to my mother, and she turns around and runs back with me on her back and puts me back behind the oak tree where I was previously hiding. I watch her moving away. She moves like the wind. She is so graceful and beautiful. But now I know how she's feeling, I feel very sad for her. What is happening next, Evangeline? Tell me what's going on now. My mother finds me. She's shaking me very hard and very aggressively. She's furious with me. I think she's seething because she thinks I deliberately didn't answer her when she called out for me. She's reprimanding me severely and telling me that I'm very naughty and I must never make her scared like that again, and that I was a very bad child to do that. I tell her that a big hairy lady took me. What does your mother say to that? She ignores me because she thinks I'm making all kinds of excuses and telling fibs. She believes I've been very badly behaved, and she's not happy with me. She's decided to ignore me because she's so very angry. I can see it in her face. Her face is bright red. She keeps looking at me, and she looks mad. Now, Evangeline, I want you to tune into the energy of the creature that you just saw. You found the source of your fear. You realize that now. Was it foolish to be fearful of this creature? What does your higher self say about that? I have nothing to fear, because the sad creature has a beautiful, kind, gentle energy, and she would never have ever hurt me. All she wanted was to be able to give and receive love, like a mother does. How do you feel about your panic attacks now, knowing that this creature that you encountered is in fact the root cause of your fear? I feel very silly and very pathetic. There was nothing to fear. There never ever was. Good girl, I'm proud of you. You're right, Evangeline. You have nothing to fear. So I want you to release that fear now. Let it go. I have the root here in my hand, and I'm pulling it out, and the fear is withering and dying as I speak. And now it is gone. There is no root to that fear any more. Do you understand that? I think so. I definitely feel that the fear is gone. Good. That was the end of my session. After my session, I was amazed how sad I felt for the hairy creature that I now know to be a Bigfoot. The poor critter wanted to abduct me because she had recently experienced a stillbirth, and she was looking for a substitute for her unbearable pain. I know what she intended to do was clearly wrong, but in the end it would seem that her conscience definitely got the better of her. I was amazed of the session that I was able to tap into her energy and feel her very thoughts and even her emotions, and it gave me an opportunity to understand and perceive her own behaviour and why she had tried to abduct me in the first place. After my incredible session with a therapist, I subsequently found out from my parents that I had been in a forest in the area in the Pacific Northwest when I went on a camping holiday in 2005. My mother said I was playing hide and seek with my sisters, and when they could not find me, they alerted my parents. I gather my mother was absolutely enraged with my older siblings for not keeping an eye on me, which is irrational because we were playing hide and seek at the time. My mother believed that I had wandered off and become very frantic, but I gather I was not gone for very long. They were oblivious to the fact that I was nearly abducted. I was apparently about 7 at the time. Beatrix was 10 and Victoria 9, which affirmed what I had observed in my regression therapy. I want to tell you, after the regression session, my panic attacks never ever returned, and my parents believed the therapy was miraculous for some reason. I never told anyone about the Bigfoot in my regression therapy. I know it sounds odd, but I didn't want to share my encounter with anyone. But in this anonymous forum I thought, well, why not? So there you are. That's my story.
Well, hello there. I hope you enjoyed the Omnibus edition. We've got many more coming our way for you to listen to. Sending you love wherever you are in the world, in North America, Canada, Kenya, wherever you may be. I send you lots and lots of love. Thank you for listening to my omnibus, and I really do hope you enjoyed it, because that's the whole idea about it, is to give you some interesting stories to listen to. So until next time, goodbye and good night.